If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon, link is in the description.
Chapter 51 I understand. I'll have someone call Singed right now, Silco said to Linwen. The idea of creating hextech gems that belonged to Zaunites filled Silco with enthusiasm. Linwen, on the other hand, thought for a moment and then said, "But, Silco, at this hour, isn't it a bit inappropriate to call Singed over?" Actually, Linwen wasn't in a hurry to do it all in one night, but it was evident that Silco had strong feelings about the independence of Zaun. He was more concerned about this matter than anyone else. For this reason, Silco ignored Linwen, let out a loud whistle, and, immediately, the door of the tavern was pushed open. Silco's men, including one man with a peculiar tattoo on his face, said loudly, "Boss, are we leaving?" Silco stood there and waved, "Go and get Singed for me. Now." The man was momentarily taken aback. "Yes, right now." "All right, please wait." He didn't ask further questions, just nodded and closed the door. "You could easily take the blueprints with you and give them to him tomorrow. There's no need to rush this one night," Linwen told Silco. "One night? Linwen, every moment counts now, and you can't understand how I feel," Silco said loudly. "With the blueprints and all these items in hand, given Singed's abilities, he'll be able to create them. But there's another issue, money, Linwen. We need a lot of money. It's not enough just to be able to make the gems ourselves. We also need a large number of hextech crystals," Silco said seriously as he stared into Linwen's eyes. Linwen scratched his head, saying, "I'm well aware of this, but Silco, we're stuck in a vicious cycle now. With hextech phones, we could have a lot of money, an endless amount of money. But to have hextech phones, we must first possess a large number of hextech crystals to produce hextech gems. Hextech crystals can only be obtained with money. The Pharaoh's family's stores have them, but they're only available for purchase with gold coins." Linwen held out his hands. "Even with all of Vander and my assets, plus half of Zaun, we couldn't buy 100 hextech crystals." The hextech crystals that Jace currently used had been acquired from the Pharaoh's family. He, as someone favored by the Pharaoh's family, of course, had this right. At the same time, the ownership of hextech technology was no longer entirely with Jace. He had traded the future for the present. But what matters in science? Knowledge? Intelligence? Of course, but the most important thing is money. Without money, what can you achieve in science? Without money, can you conduct research? "I can provide the initial funds," Silco said solemnly to Linwen. "I've earned a lot of money from selling shimmer. I'll buy the initial required hextech crystals, so you don't need to worry about that." "Silco, you're not allowed to sell shimmer in Zaun," Linwen said seriously. He was genuinely concerned that Silco might be carried away by a sense of revenge and act recklessly. The gap between Piltover and Zaun still existed, even though the Undercity now had shimmer and would soon possess hextech technology. The difference between the two city-states remained enormous. But for Silco, there was finally hope. Shimmer was really beginning to shine. Though faint, it prevented Silco from always considering a do-or-die battle against Piltover and gambling with the future. Silco looked at Linwen with mixed feelings, tapped his forehead, and said aloud, "I understand that the sale of shimmer in Zaun will ruin our grand plan. I have a sense of proportion in this matter. Moreover, Linwen, do they have money? Zaun is broke, too poor, so poor that the so-called alchemical technology consists of rummaging through the stinking sewers and assembling discarded items from the refuse dump that the upper city residents don't want. So if we want to make money, I know where I can get it from. I can make money, a lot of it." In response to Linwen's curious gaze, Silco extended his fingers and continued, "It's from the upper city, and from abroad. Are you planning to sell to Piltover and Nakas? In Piltover, they won't need this kind of thing," Linwen said, furrowing his brow. "You're wrong, Linwen." Silco smiled confidently, spreading his hands. Underneath his suit, a corner of his vest revealed a touch of red. He said, "Piltover citizens, contrary to what you think, are the ones who need shimmer the most. You've always believed that shimmer is addictive and harmful to the human body, but that's the original shimmer. Today's shimmer is not as much about its addictive qualities as it is about people's craving for power." Silco spoke slowly, "Piltover citizens are hypocritical. They may seem glamorous, peaceful and friendly on the surface, but most of the time, they are the ones who love to bully the weak. In such a bustling city-state, there exists such a cruel law of survival. The Piltover scientists who have been oppressed and humiliated for a long time by Piltover's survival laws are the best customers for Shimmer. The people Silco was referring to were those who were desperate to join the great families and receive investments from the wealthy citizens of the upper city. More than 50% of these people were Piltover citizens, while the rest were probably science enthusiasts from various parts of the world who had come to Piltover with a longing for science. The great families of Piltover controlled over 90% of Piltover's resources. In Piltover, they were the unquestionable authorities. Therefore, the accumulated resentment and humiliation from long-term oppression became a vent for Shimmer. This substance could not only enhance physical abilities but also increase reaction speed and alertness. It allowed the weak to experience the sensations of the powerful in a short amount of time. However, since it was an alchemical concoction, it naturally had side effects. The side effect of Shimmer was that excessive consumption could cause genetic mutations. All right, but be careful not to make Piltover too chaotic, Linwen sighed and said. Wouldn't chaos be a good thing? Silco frowned and took a step forward, staring at Linwen's face. He whispered, or is it because of him? Have you grew fond of a Piltover citizen? Silco, widen your perspective. Piltover is not our enemy. In this vast world, we might have many enemies, but Piltover certainly isn't one of them, Linwen said helplessly. This world is enormous, so vast that Linwen has been in this world for 5 years but has only ever been to the Twin Cities. He hasn't been to Shurima, hasn't been to the Valoran continent, hasn't been to the Fruljord in the north, and hasn't encountered the mysterious and unpredictable Ionia. Kumungu has characters like Zyra, Ikathai that had been overrun by the void, and a warrior who has lived for 1,000 years is organizing a team. This world is vast. So vast that Piltover and Zaun are just a tiny part of it. Silco certainly understood this as well. He even knew some ancient secret histories from thousands of years ago. He knew that there were extraordinary powers in this world that could easily kill him. But what did that matter? Why should he care about those mysterious gods, warriors, and mages? He cared only about the present. So, he looked at Linwen and said with a cold gaze, I don't care about things hundreds or even thousands of years from now. Linwen, I only care about the here and now. I care about whether Zaun can become independent during my lifetime, whether the Zaunites can stand up. I don't care about anything else. I hope you can set aside those useless emotions, Linwen, at least until Piltover submits. I hope you can be firmer. Upon hearing Silco's words, Linwen wanted to argue. He wanted to tell Silco that there were many things in this world that he hadn't thought of. A warrior from Shurima, who had lived for thousands of years, roamed the continent. There was a Darkin named Atrox, lurking in the north. And that guy might recall his former territory one day. That place was Zaun. Zaun was once a harbor under Shurima's dominion. If he returned, not even 1,000 Linwens could stop him. The more people, the more powerful he become. If that time comes, the only thing that might hinder him was Jace's hex deck. Piltover citizens weren't really the enemy. At least, Piltover shouldn't become an enemy in the future. But Linwen's mouth opened and closed, and he finally said, I understand. I will. I'll do what I need to do until Zaun is completely free. Silco closed his eyes. That's good. Linwen couldn't find words while looking into Silco's eyes. What kind of eyes were those? Calm, without any ripples. But Vander, who was beside Silco, kept shaking his head at Linwen, telling him not to say anything more. Without experiencing it firsthand, don't advise others. Sometimes, if you don't understand, just keep your mouth shut. Because you never know what others have been through. Just like now. Chapter 52 Little Genius Echo. Hey, can you hear me? Can you still hear me like this? Yeah, I can hear you. By the way, 6, move a bit farther. Linwen said that in more open places, the reception distance is longer. With a proud look, Powder held the hex deck phone. Among a group of friends, he stood there like the proudest of all. But suddenly, there was an annoying voice from the side. It's my turn now, right? I won't let you play with it. This is a gift from Linwen. Like a cat protecting its food, Powder instantly got defensive when Milo, looking curious, wanted to grab the hex deck phone. She warily hid the hex deck phone close to her chest and bent her body as if to say, one step closer, Milo, and I'm going to yell. Things were different now. As long as she opened the hex deck phone, if Milo bullied her, Powder only needed to shout, and Six would know. Then, Six would come running to her side and thump Milo's head a couple of times to make him understand the consequences of bullying Powder. Clearly, the smart Milo understood this too. His brain was as sharp as his appearance. So, he reluctantly raised his hands and made a conceding gesture, taking a step back. Meanwhile, Six, along with Clagger, was running around in some unknown location. Milo, get away from Powder. While running, Six spoke into her hextech phone. This left Milo on the other end somewhat speechless. Why did Linwen only give you and Six hextech phones? Milo exclaimed, I protest. Linwen treats me and Clagger differently. From the hextech phone, Clagger's voice chimed in, his voice hearty, I don't mind, Milo. Please don't bring me into this. After all, Six and Powder have theirs, and it makes no difference to me. We're family. This is exactly what I dislike about you, Clagger. You always inadvertently say things that embarrass others. You make me look like the bad guy. Milo sounded disheartened. With your attitude, how can we ask Linwen for hextech phones? It's as if Linwen doesn't even like his two younger brothers. Enough, Milo, don't complain anymore, Six's voice rang in a right tone. Her voice then came through from Powder's end but with a slight crackling sound. When the time comes, Linwen will prepare for you and Clagger. Six, we're at the maximum distance. Powder quickly shouted. On the other side, Six came to a halt and said, Hey, Powder, are you guys outside the tavern right now? Yes, Milo, David, Cyberpunk flashback, anyway random character, and I are at the alley entrance. Six estimated, it's just like Linwen said, in open terrain, you can have a range of about 100 meters. But in complex terrain like now, you can only make phone calls within about 70 meters. Did you find the little guy yet? Not yet. Six said with a cheeky grin, but almost. Benzo's shop is very close to us. All right, I'll wait for you to get back. After Powder finished speaking, she pressed a button on her blue hextech phone and then carefully tucked it into her pocket, keeping an eye on Milo. What are you looking at me like that for? Milo responded in disbelief, staring at Powder and saying loudly, I'm not going to steal a kid's toy. Humph. Powder made a ghost face at Milo and leaned against the wall. Since Linwen had given them the hextech phones yesterday evening, both Powder and Six had been obsessed with them. These phones were their favorite toys of the year, even better than all the dolls. Late at night, Powder and Six would lie in their bunk beds, cover themselves with blankets, and then open their hextech phones to talk quietly under the covers. Powder was truly overjoyed. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Six returned with Clagger and Echo. Six had called Echo for help, even though it wasn't clear why adults wanted Echo there for the conversation. But when she received a gift from Linwen, Six immediately agreed, wearing a blissful smile. Now, no matter what Linwen said, Six would go along with it and do whatever he asked. Anything was possible. Let's go, Linwen wants to see you. Why does Big Brother want to see me? Echo, who had clearly just woken up, was pushed into the Last Drop Tavern by Six in a groggy state. Once they entered the tavern, Echo's face froze. Although Last Drop Tavern was still closed for business today, there were a lot of people inside. It was a grim-looking group of adults, varying in height and size, but they all had a fierce and menacing appearance. This made the 10-year-old Echo extremely nervous. It wasn't until the crowd parted that Linwen waved to Echo, who quickly ran up to him. Big Brother, what did you want to talk about? Echo asked. Echo nervously glanced around, and when he locked eyes with someone, he immediately lowered his head. Silco looked at this young boy, who was about the same age as Powder, and he even seemed a bit shorter than her. Linwen, are you sure he can handle this? Silco asked doubtfully. I believe in genius, but I don't think he can understand hextech schematics. That's where you're wrong, Silco, Linwen replied. He sat on the ground and pulled Echo toward him, their heads touching as he grinned. My little brother is a prodigy in this field, and his talent is comparable to my fighting talent. Silco was taken aback. Is the little guy really that amazing? Vander, sitting at the head of the table, said in surprise. How come Benzo never told me about this? You and Benzo always thought of them as kids who couldn't accomplish anything because you saw them grow up, Linwen explained. You only noticed their changes when they became remarkable. With a gentle push from Linwen, Echo spoke nervously, Big Brother. Go ahead, Echo. Let them see how amazing my little brother is. But you haven't told me what I'm supposed to do, Echo said, clearly anxious. Surrounded by a dozen burly men, all of them nearly twice his height, the overwhelming pressure made Echo extremely nervous. If Linwen hadn't been sitting right next to him, he might have been scared enough to kneel down and beg for mercy. In front of the enforcers, he often acted this way, and there was nothing embarrassing about it. As long as it kept him from getting beaten, what was face worth anyway? You'll understand when you see it, Singed said, holding a pile of blueprints. He looked at the trembling Echo, reached out and put his hand on Echo's shoulder. His voice was hoarse as he said, "Don't be afraid, we just need you to take a look at this thing." Singed's tone was neither affirming nor denying, more like that of a detached observer. He spoke softly, "Linwen believes you can help me, and I want to know if you are up for it." Throughout his journey, his judgment seems to have never been wrong, so I'm curious, kid. Do you think you'll be the one to make him wrong? Singed spoke slowly. From the moment Echo walked in, Singed's eyes lit up. Even though Echo was cowering, walking under the adults, and appeared timid, even pathetic, Singed smelled something peculiar about him. It was an indescribable feeling. Deep down, you couldn't help but sense that this person was extraordinary. The last time he had smelled this kind of scent was nearly a decade ago. He wanted to know if his intuition was still as sharp. Upon hearing the tall and slender man's words, Echo immediately replied in a loud voice, "Of course not. I'll help my big brother." Singed handed over the meticulously arranged materials he had been working on all night to Echo and said, "Come on, take a look at these things." Echo stood on his tiptoes, reached out, and took the blueprints from Singed's hands. Chapter 53 Little Genius Powder. Is this something you've put together?" Echo had been looking at the blueprints for about 10 minutes, and then, he looked up at Singed in shock. He had seen these things before. Linwen had shown him the crystal. These structures and the idea of attempting to change their composition. Echo was terrified. Could you really change the structure this way? But this shouldn't be the technology of the Undercity. Many of the things here, they were all things the Undercity didn't have, things you couldn't even see, let alone buy, and the upper city people wouldn't sell to the Undercity. Can you understand it? Singed asked him. Echo nodded. He looked up at Singed, and when he met Singed's slightly dilated and yellowed pupils, Echo was startled for a moment. But immediately he perked up and said, "I've seen this thing before. Are you studying how to change its structure?" "I thought about using electricity to change the interior's hollow structure and then adding new materials to make it more stable, but I failed. I couldn't buy gold wire, and I didn't have equipment for such high current. But this device is incredible." Echo was in awe, staring at an interactive device on the blueprints, lost in amazement. He mumbled some words, which those present couldn't understand except Linwen and Singed. Silco also sat up straighter. At first, he had underestimated this kid, but after seeing the appreciation in Singed's eyes, he began to take him more seriously. In the Undercity, did they really have such a talented kid? "You're amazing!" Echo sincerely exclaimed. "No, the amazing one is you," Singed smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in a while. "Linwen, he's even smarter than I imagined. He's a genius." Linwen touched his nose. Initially, he could understand what they were saying, but later on, with Echo and Singed's words, he started having trouble understanding. "All I can say is that this is truly incredible. But that's how geniuses are." Thinking about Zevi, who built her first multi-frequency sonic knife at the age of 5, Linwen felt like he could accept anything. At 10 years old, Echo understanding hextech technology, it doesn't seem excessive, right? "So, how is it?" "I told you he could help us," Linwen raised an eyebrow and said to Silco. Silco nodded and said, "I was too short-sighted." "What's your name?" Silco smiled, showing goodwill towards someone who could benefit Zaun. He tried to make his smile as gentle as possible, just like when he was alone with Powder. He didn't want his scarred face to scare Echo. "Are you from the Black Ally?" Silco nodded. "Yes. I'm from the Black Ally too." "Whose kid are you? I might know your family's adults." Echo scratched his head and answered, "Benzo, do you know Benzo?" Silco suddenly fell silent. A dark cloud seemed to loom over his head. "Ha ha 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 ha." Linwen and Vander burst into laughter on the side. Silco's sudden silence was, Of course, understood by Linwen and Vander. Vander, brother Linwen, what are you laughing at? Silco patted Echo's shoulder, trying to maintain an elegant tone, and said, some things are better left unknown, child. That way, it won't be too awkward between you and me. Echo was clearly puzzled and didn't quite understand the situation. All right, let's get to work. Linwen clapped his hands, and Echo was promptly pulled to the bar by Singed, with Linwen following. Silco and Vander couldn't understand but were willing to spend the time watching. However, Six and Powder, who were being ignored by the others, felt uncomfortable. What are you doing? Powder pushed her way into the crowd and tugged at Linwen's clothes, asking him. I want to join you too. Linwen looked down at Powder and coaxed her, saying, you can help us by pouring water. Powder sniffled, I want to do what Echo is doing. No, you can't, you're too young. I'm not young. I'm older than Echo. He's the little one. Powder was quite dissatisfied with Linwen's response. But just as Linwen was thinking of how to make Powder voluntarily give up her help, after all, this was not child's play, and it wasn't time to mess around, Echo suddenly said, Big brother, let Powder join too. She's smarter than me, Echo said firmly. See, Linwen? I can help. Powder immediately raised her head proudly, looking at Linwen. Linwen looked at Echo with a puzzled expression and a look of disbelief on his face, saying, Echo, you need to understand this isn't a game, and we can't fool around. Echo spoke up, Big brother, I'm not fooling around. Powder is really smart, and many of my inventions were made with her help. Is it really true? Linwen, let me through. Powder was displeased and kicked Linwen's leg lightly, then walked past him. Echo made room for Powder, and Singed didn't say anything. Vander was about to say something but decided against it. I know that Powder has always been inventing weapons on her own, and I'm aware of that, but those have always been just small toys, Linwen said to Six. Six helped Powder by saying, those are weapons, the ones she made. Six helped Powder, Powder is very clever. She could make weapons at a young age, stuffing nails and some gas into a can to create nail bombs. Linwen understood what Six meant. After all, Powder had shown Linwen some of her inventions before, like the little monkey. But those things don't work, do they? Six chuckled, that's because Powder is kind-hearted. She deliberately weakened their power to make them look like toys. Otherwise, they could kill people. Powder is a weapons genius, and I've always believed in her, Six said to Linwen. Powder had started trying to make things on her own from the age of 5, starting with toys made of tin. Later, since Six was always getting into fights with others outside, and Powder couldn't help much due to her weak physique, she decided to make weapons to assist her sister. However, her first successful invention was something she denied. She didn't want that kind of thing. That level of destructive power could actually kill people. Now, Powder was in front of Singed, looking up and pointing at a spot on the paper, talking to Singed. I don't know how to explain this principle, but, are you trying to link this and that together? Echo explained from the side, Powder, this is called chemistry, it's the principle of substitution. Powder interrupted Echo and huffed, saying, I don't care about the principles. In any case, we connect this to that and we transfer it like do, right? We make it become this thing, and a part of this thing becomes it. Is that what you mean? Singed looked at Echo, then at Powder and said with emotion, you're absolutely right, little girl. Linwen stood outside. But I don't know how to do it, I can only understand it. I can't create it, Powder added quickly. Singed was quite satisfied. Children in Zaun rarely had the opportunity for education, and yet this girl, who clearly hadn't received a formal education and grew up in the Undercity, understood the creator's intentions just by looking at the blueprints. This was talent. Powder was a genius. So Singed said, you've done a great job. Vander also felt deeply moved. Initially, he wanted to tell Powder not to cause trouble, but now he realized that his father didn't know his daughter as well as he thought. And Linwen? Linwen, damn it, am I the only useless one here? Six was a genius in brawling, Jace was a genius, Victor was a genius, Echo was a genius, and now Powder was a genius too. Even Miss Caitlin he met in the upper city was a natural police detective with sharp insights. What about me? If I didn't have this system, wouldn't I just be a NPC in the crowd? I'm screwed. You see, I told you Powder could do it. Six poked Linwen in the chest with her elbow, grinning. All right, you were right, Linwen suddenly remembered something. Yes, Powder was Jinx. And who is Jinx? She's a crazy criminal from Zaun, a madwoman who can make the Piltover enforcers helpless using various firearms. And now, Linwen suddenly realized where the problem was. All this time, he thought of Jinx as just a crazy yandere and a skilled sharpshooter. But who provided her with fishbones and pow-pow? Where did she get such powerful firearms from Zaun? With advanced firearms capable of easily destroying a large building and causing unrest, if Zaunites were capable of manufacturing such weapons themselves, they would have gained a significant negotiating position with Piltover long ago. And now, Linwen had the answer. It was clear. Powder made those weapons herself. Linwen looked at the blue-haired girl conversing with Echo and Singed in the crowd, and a chill ran down his spine. Beside her, Six was another crazy individual. The violence-loving Six. Linwen swallowed hard and turned to Six. Six met Linwen's gaze and immediately made a peculiar face. She nudged Linwen with her elbow a couple of times and asked loudly, "Why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face?" "No." Linwen chickened out. The genius Powder. And the violent Six. Chapter 54 Just Colleagues. On November 9, year 978, the second day of Progress Day, Jace woke up early in the morning, feeling the stiffness and discomfort in his back. He couldn't believe he had spent the night on such a cramped and shabby wooden bed. What was even more unbelievable was that he had shared the same bed with Victor. In reality, it didn't bother Jace much. He wasn't particularly obsessed with cleanliness, and Victor, unlike most Zaunites, was different. As an accomplished scholar, Victor always cared about his appearance. So, in a way, Victor was even cleaner than Jace. His body was always fresh, clean, and free of sweat, which was quite different from Jace, who was accustomed to the smell of his own sweat from working at the forge. However, if the bed were a bit larger, softer, and the bedding was of higher quality, Jace would have been more comfortable. Although there was no moldy smell, and it wasn't as damp as he had initially expected, the grey and stiff bedspread, the hard mattress that felt like cardboard, and the bed that was barely 5 feet wide were quite challenging. The length wasn't even 5.8 feet. During the night, Jace's feet often extended beyond the bed. Zaun was much colder than Piltover. Jace was beginning to doubt his decision to come to Zaun, questioning why he had ventured into this place of hardship and discomfort. "Victor, you and Linwen are really something. You turned down the opportunity in Piltover for this? Look at this bed. Is this fit for a human?" Jace grumbled as he put on his shoes. Victor was amused as he replied, "Jace, you just don't understand." Covering himself with the feathered shawl he had on his shoulder, Victor took a deep breath, feeling refreshed. He knew that Linwen was responsible for this. "This is my home. I never really understand you and Linwen," Jace said as he buttoned his shirt and checked himself in the mirror. Victor shook his head and said, "I told you not to come down here, but you insisted." Jace smiled and replied, "I can't let you out of my sight. As your future best partner, I can't afford any mishaps. I need to watch over you constantly." Victor stood up, leaning on his cane as he headed out. "Breakfast in the Undercity might not suit your taste." As they pushed open the door, Victor gave Jace a warning. But, after they left the room and sat at the dining table, Jace looked down at the food in front of him. Then, he glanced at Victor, who was calmly sipping his fish soup. Jace immediately turned his head to look at the scruffy, elderly man and asked, Mr. Zoran, do you all eat this so early in the morning?" Zoran looked at Victor and chuckled, "Victor, it seems your friend from the upper city isn't used to our food." "Forgive him, Zoran," Victor said as he took a sip of the salty, hot fish soup and bit into a piece of fish. "He's the future of Piltover. If he falls ill from our food early in the morning, we won't be able to bear that responsibility." "Enough, Victor," Jace picked up the greasy bowl and said, "Aren't they saying that Zaun is poor? Eating fish early in the morning, is this considered poor?" Jace took a small sip, made a few chewing sounds, and his eyes lit up. Mr. Zoran, your cooking is really good. It's even better than I imagined." Victor interjected, "If you're going to ask why we don't eat bread, sausages and eggs in the morning, it's better not to ask such foolish questions, Jace." After finishing the soup and breakfast, Zoran looked at Victor in surprise and said, "I didn't expect that after all these years, Victor, you've become quite cheerful. Victor nodded, I have found my purpose. Congratulations, my child, Zoran said. I think you've found like-minded friends. Zoran glanced at Jace and then said to Victor. Jace turned to Victor in surprise, you see, they all think I'm your friend. All along, Jace had considered himself Victor's closest friend. After all, they shared the same dream of using Hextech technology to benefit humanity. However, due to the divide between Piltover and Zaun, Victor never referred to Jace as a friend, he always called them colleagues, just colleagues. As he drank the fish soup, Victor said, Zoran, you're overthinking it. Jace and I are just colleagues. Damn it, Victor, will you ever learn to speak? Jace exclaimed. Don't listen to Victor, Mr. Zoran. We are friends, Jace said, putting his arm around Victor's neck and shaking him vigorously. Jace, I can't be your friend as a citizen of the Undercity. Don't keep teasing me about that. I'm already changing my perception of you and your people, Jace said, squeezing Victor's neck, which caused a few drops of soup to spill from Victor's bowl onto Jace's sleeve. He didn't mind and continued to shake Victor vigorously. I admit I had biases against you and Linwen before, but I'm changing now, aren't I? Jace was genuinely considering making a change. Coming to Zaun with Linwen and Victor was his first step towards that change. He wanted to try to abandon the preconceived notions he had learned in Piltover about Zaun. He was determined to see the city of Zaun and its people in a new light. For Jace, this was a challenging task. He inherently carried the arrogance of a Piltover resident and held biases against the Undercity. However, for the sake of his friends, Jace was willing to change himself. After all, the people of Zaun were undeniably remarkable. Seeing the city from the perspective of an observer, a visitor, and an outsider, rather than as a Piltover scientist, Jace genuinely admired the creativity of the Zaunites. Despite living in dire circumstances, they had not given up, instead, they had created an environment suitable for their survival. Look around, those simple metals and machines had constructed an underground world. Even craftsmen like Zoran used methods entirely different from those in Piltover when repairing machinery. It might be considered outdated, unable to keep up with the times, but it was an art of repair suited for the Zaunites. In extreme conditions, without the luxury of proper equipment, they mastered the skill of repairing devices. Old Zoran looked at Victor with a sense of happiness. The young man in front of him had lost the sense of inferiority and gloom. Victor had become more cheerful. Victor, are you cracking jokes now? Zoran asked. I'm not joking, Mr. Zoran. Mr. Talus is like a noble from Piltover, while I'm just an Undercity resident, Victor shrugged. Jace sat down with a sense of dejection and sipped the savory fish soup. He muttered, I told you, I'm trying to change. I know I might still have biases against you Zaunites, but you have to give me some more time, right? From both you and Linwen, I've seen the positive side of Zaun, and moving forward, I'll try to discover more and better aspects of Zaun. Victor, making a show of it, let out a non-committal hum, as he continued to sip his soup. However, he was only putting on an act, and a big smile spread across Victor's face. Chapter 55 The Future of Piltover. The third day of Progress Day. Piltover. The council convened, and Councilor Mel's expression remained calm, but her keen gaze scrutinized every council member present. In her view, everyone in the room, except for Professor Heimerdinger, had ulterior motives. Including Mel herself, there were 5 council members attending this meeting, and even though not all were present, the presence of 5 council members indicated that the matter to be discussed was of great importance. Indeed, it was. Standing outside the circular council table was a robust woman. Mel pressed a button on the table, and a spotlight illuminated her as she stood up, elegantly and nobly saying, Grayson. Mel looked down on the sturdy woman as she continued in a solemn tone, the council has given you ample time, but you have still failed to complete your mission. It's my dereliction, councilor. With her brown curly hair and a robust physique, Grayson stood there holding her enforcer helmet. Her face remained composed, and she calmly addressed Mel, saying, Councilor, the Undercity residents are now united, under the leadership of Vander. They have formed a new alliance, and the barons in the Undercity now follow his lead. Grayson, helmet in hand and the other hand behind her back, went on to say, the Undercity residents are no longer fragmented, they are now united and resisting our control. At the mention of Vander, a rotund council member on one side of the circular table narrowed his eyes. When the spotlight fell on him, he frowned and said, I remember this person. A few years ago during the Ashes, he led the Undercity residents in the attack the bridge, right? It's him, I recall now. A tall and thin council member extended his hand, looking left and right as the spotlight shone on him. He then spoke, it seems the Undercity residents are resolute in their actions. Why didn't he die during that riot? Mel stood there, feeling somewhat of a headache. She sighed and said, the Undercity had just recently stabilized, why is it erupting into chaos once again? However, Grayson remained silent. Now we know that what was stolen from Talus was hextech crystals, but in reality, I would say that these items are available for sale in the Pharaoh's family shops. Though they might explode and be dangerous, they can hardly be considered illegal, the tall and thin council member said. After hearing his words and seeing his expression, Grayson knew what he was thinking. Perhaps he found holding meetings tedious and wanted the council to conclude quickly, so he could attend a musical, have afternoon tea, or something similar. Grayson withdrew her gaze in silence. Even though she knew that some of these council members weren't productive, she was powerless. Behind them stood powerful interest families that united to control Piltover. Those who were pushed to the forefront, the council members, were essentially pioneers seeking to secure their family's interests. Grayson's guess was not incorrect. On the council table, the tall and thin council member and the rotund council member exchanged a glance. The latter immediately nodded and raised his hand, saying, I agree with his suggestion. Everyone, the Undercity residents are ignorant and foolish. Even if they obtained the hextech crystals, they wouldn't be able to create anything useful. It's possible that the stolen hextech crystals have already exploded, and the thief might have been killed. The thin and tall councillor immediately chimed in, indeed, and even if they're hiding hextech crystals, I don't believe they have the ability to craft hextech gems. They are far from capable. Mel, however, turned her gaze towards the Yordle sitting in his chair, unable to reach the ground, and asked, Professor, what do you think? Mel, what? Heimerdinger rubbed his hands together. Professor, I'm asking if you believe the Undercity residents are capable of controlling hextech crystals. Heimerdinger pondered for a moment and replied, there's a very small chance, but it's a 1 in a million chance. Even geniuses like Victor would need to understand the significance of hextech technology through Jace's knowledge. I'm also learning from Jace. If the Undercity could produce another genius like Victor, and they had Jace's guidance, then they might indeed have the potential to control hextech. Heimerdinger paused for a moment and then continued, but given the Undercity's academic atmosphere and environment, even if they had a genius, they could become foolish due to a lack of proper guidance. The professor is correct. So, Councillor Mel, let the Undercity residents amuse themselves. We only need to cut off their black market, and it won't be long before they surrender to us on their own. Without their economy, the Undercity residents won't survive more than a few winters. The thin and tall councillor also agreed, exactly. The issue of the Undercity isn't really an issue. What we should focus on now is the distribution of benefits from hextech. Suddenly, except for Professor Heimerdinger, the atmosphere among the council members turned tense. They had shifted from discussing the Undercity issue to discussing the allocation of benefits from hextech. Grayson, standing below, watched as the council members, who had previously discussed the Undercity issue, had now turned their attention to the distribution of benefits from hextech. As family investors, their vision was undoubtedly sharp, and anything that could amaze and impress Professor Heimerdinger was indeed promising. This was why, even though Talus's hextech technology was still a concept, it had received investments from several major families including Medarda, Pharaohs, and Kiraman. These three families were some of the top-tier families in Piltover. And now, Madame Kiraman happened to be sitting at one corner of the council table. I propose temporarily blocking the bridge. We can allow Undercity residents to seek employment in Piltover, but prohibit Piltover residents from entering the Undercity for trade. As long as we cut off their source of income, it won't take long for their so-called Zaun alliance to self-destruct. The portly councillor raised his hand, and with a click, the room's lights dimmed. Grayson stood below. Boom! With a burst of light, the first to agree with the portly councillor was the thin and tall councillor. Next, Grayson saw Madame Kiraman's face. Then, it was Councillor Mel. Finally, Professor Heimerdinger. Grayson stood there quietly. She didn't know what to say. She had already conveyed everything she could do and say. But they were so dismissive of the unity among the Undercity residents. It left Grayson feeling conflicted. On one hand, she thought that no matter how united the Undercity residents might be, there was no possibility of resisting Piltover. But on the other hand, Grayson felt, this time, things might be different. All right, ladies and gentlemen, a councilor waved a hand, and Grayson was expelled from the council. The council that should have questioned her and dealt with the Undercity issue had changed. Now, let's discuss it. Grayson heard his voice. The future of Piltover. Chapter 56. Another year. On the third day of Progress Day, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Linwen arrived at a room in Vander's temporary research facility dedicated to studying hextech technology. The room was typically occupied by exceptional Zaunite alchemists, including Singed, Echo, and Powder. Their future would keep them stationed in this place. Besides these three, Silco was also present, and he had practically made Black Ally his home during the past 3 days. Knocking gently on the door, Linwen entered to find a group of individuals inside. A large blackboard occupied the room, with Singed bent over it. Seated in front of him were Powder and Echo, who were both startled by Linwen's entrance. Linwen took on a nurturing tone and said, "Powder, it's time to go home for dinner," and then he turned his attention to Echo, and Echo, "Benzo wants you home early too." With the materials Linwen provided, theoretically, they could begin their research on creating hextech gems. However, Singed explained that the actual research on hextech gems had not yet started. In Singed's view, although Echo and Powder were both geniuses, they lacked the necessary knowledge in this field, especially Powder. While Echo had received some mechanical education under Benzo, Powder had never been to school, and her understanding of everything was based on instinct. This aspect of her character was greatly appreciated by Singed. She was a natural scientist. She had a keen sense of creation. In Singed's eyes, Echo and Powder represented two different directions. Echo seemed more adept at pioneering and creating, while Powder was more suitable for applying rules to create things. When Singed mentioned this to Linwen, Linwen's first reaction was that it sounded like Jace and Victor, didn't it? Jace created hextech technology, but Linwen believed that Victor's research in this field had now caught up with Jace's. The distinction was between creation and application, and Linwen thought Zevi Rita's future would be on par with Jace in terms of the application of hextech technology. Jace was a pioneer in hextech, and his task was not to figure out how to apply well-made devices using hextech, but to continuously explore and discover the possibilities of hextech technology. "All right, everyone, it's time to head home." When Linwen arrived, Singed waved his hand, indicating that the day's lesson was over. Powder and Echo both nodded and gave deep bows of respect to Singed, their teacher. Knowledge was a precious commodity in Piltover, and even more so in Zaun. Knowledge could truly change a person's destiny. Singed was passing on his knowledge to these two children, and Echo and Powder respected him for it. However, the moment the lesson was over, Powder quickly turned to Linwen. "What are we having for dinner today?" Taking Linwen's hand, Powder looked up at Linwen. Linwen, holding both Echo and Powder's hands, replied, "We'll have some meat tonight." "Wow, what kind of meat?" "I don't want fish." "It's not fish. I had Vander's people buy some beef from the topside." "Beef?" Powder's eyes immediately lit up. Echo, who was standing nearby, also drooled a bit and said, "Big brother Linwen, can I join you for dinner?" "No, you can't. Benzo wants you to get back home right away," Linwen replied with a hearty laugh. Thinking of Benzo and Silco, Linwen found it amusing. Silco didn't care what Benzo thought of him, as his sole mission was to revive Zaun. However, with Benzo, well, Silco couldn't stand his constant scolding. After all, Benzo had a habit of bringing people's mothers into the conversation. Silco had almost forgotten what his mother looked like, and he didn't want her to be the topic of discussion. That's why he had been talking back lately. And Benzo? He just didn't trust Silco. He had argued with Vander about it twice, but Benzo couldn't deny Vander's trust in Silco. After all, he had once betrayed Silco, and this time, no matter what, he had to trust Silco. So, when he learned that Echo was going to study under Silco's subordinates, Benzo was in quite a dilemma. On one hand, he didn't want Echo to get to know Silco, but on the other hand, he was afraid of jeopardizing Echo's future due to his own selfishness. He was afraid of obstructing Echo's prospects. In the end, Benzo chose to compromise. His dissatisfaction with Silco and concern for Echo's future led Benzo to ultimately choose the latter. After all, he was a father. But he had one condition: Echo had to be back home before nightfall, otherwise, he would go to Silco with a stick to retrieve him. That guy was too good at brainwashing. As a result, Linwen could only apologize and say to little Echo, Benzo gave a stern warning. You know how he gets, he even scolds me when he's angry. Oh, Echo replied, looking somewhat dejected. He hadn't had beef before. He only knew that it was a food enjoyed by topsiders. But soon, Echo's spirits lifted again. Because Linwen patted her head, don't be sad, I'll have Powder bring some for you to eat tomorrow. Really? Really? Ding, Time Tinkerer's favor ability increased significantly, and you gained 2000 experience points. Ding, you have leveled up. Linwen chuckled silently. Well, it seems that the future of Zaun can be swayed by beef. Echo ran back home by himself. The Black Alley was relatively safe these days, so Linwen didn't need to escort him. Instead, he held Powder's hand and walked step by step back to the last drop. Linwen, are you leaving again? On the way, Powder suddenly asked. She felt it. She was quite intelligent. She was just still very young, and while she could think of many things, she couldn't always act on them. Yeah, I'll be going back to the topside tomorrow. Again, for Zaun. That's right. Six told me not to keep bothering you. She said you're working on something big, and I'd only distract you and mess things up, Powder said carefully with her head bowed. She knew that clinging to Linwen all the time wasn't good. But she liked Linwen. That's why she always wanted to be close to him. Your sister is teaching you useless things again, Linwen said, stopping in his tracks, crouching down to look at Powder. He moved her arms away from her face, gazing into her eyes, and said with a cheerful smile, she herself won't stop bothering me, yet she's telling you not to cling to me. I'd say your sister is just jealous. It's not like that. Why are you so conceited? Powder laughed. You don't need to listen to Six, Linwen said as he reached out and patted Powder's little head. I don't want you to grow distant from me, Powder. You are important to me. Powder looked at Linwen and asked, really? Of course, it's true. Linwen asked back, why do you think I keep going to the topside? Powder pouted and tucked her little face. Six said that you're doing something big for Zaun. It's for Zaun, but it's also for all of you. Linwen patted her little head. Boom. Overhead, the sky lit up with Piltover's fireworks. Looking up, it was evening, and even in the depths of the Undercity, Linwen could see the bright fireworks. And once again, he heard those voices, Happy Progress Day. Linwen looked at Powder, who had her mouth wide open, staring blankly at the sky. The fireworks had captured Powder's fascination. It had been another year. Sitting next to Powder, Linwen watched the sky with her. I'm in Runeterra. In Zaun, another year has passed. Zaun is quiet, and Piltover is lively. Powder gazed at the fireworks, her eyes filled with longing. Linwen, however, was contemplating. This was his 6th year. He couldn't be indecisive any longer. For Zaun. For Powder. For Six. It won't be long, Powder, and we'll be able to release our own fireworks. Ah, Linwen, what did you just say? I said, these fireworks are so beautiful. Yes, they are beautiful. Comment. 0 comment. Vote. Chapter 57, 57 Councilor Talus. Noxian year 984 middle of July, under the scorching sun of Piltover. The entire city shimmered like it was covered in a golden veil. In this city of progress, the first thing that amazed visitors was the array of towering buildings, along with various strange devices installed high in the air. But the most eye-catching was undoubtedly the newly constructed Council Hall. It was the tallest building in Piltover, now serving as the city's center of power. Beside the grand structure, a slightly shorter building emitted a sudden arc-shaped shield-like blue light. Following this, the space twisted, and after a dazzling display of blue light, a massive skyship appeared abruptly in the sky. Damn it, those greedy Fjordians. Damn, they are so greedy. It's just a poro, and aside from the wealthy who want to keep them as pets, what's the value? If it weren't for Professor Heimerdinger sparking the poro pet craze, who would want to keep those little snowballs? Meatless, inedible, and can't even be used as a mount. They lack any combat capabilities in that place. They can only serve as cute playthings, yet they're sold at such high prices. This is what you get when you do business with them. They deserve to eat frozen dirt in the icy tundra. The airship gradually landed beside the tall building, and then, a blue light bridge extended from the building, forming a metallic blue staircase that connected to the exit of the airship. Immediately after, a merchant-looking person, furious, descended from the ship. In his hand, he held a peculiar blue long box and was constantly yelling into it, directed at the other end of the box. I told you to keep an eye out. I went to Fruljord, and the family's matters should have been handled by you guys. Now you tell me you've been waiting for my message. My goodness, there's no signal at all in Fruljord. I couldn't make any calls there. Writing a letter? Do you think this is still the past? It would take months for a letter to travel back and forth. What are you thinking? Tell me to go to a more open place? Do you think that's Piltover? I can't even make a call in the sky. What are you thinking? You are a hopeless idiot. His voice clearly disturbed the people nearby, and a few men and women holding similar long boxes walked past him, all casting disdainful glances his way. Soon, an enforcer with advanced equipment approached, wearing a smile as he spoke to the merchant. Sir, please lower your volume. Do not create disturbances around the skyport gate, and also try not to make hextech calls while disembarking from the airship. It's not safe for you. There have been cases where people slipped and lost their lives because of this. The merchant immediately nodded and lowered his volume but didn't hang up the hextech phone. Seeing this, the enforcer shrugged and went back to his post. At the same time, inside Piltover's council hall, a new meeting was called with a total of 7 council members in attendance. It wasn't a representative from the Pharaoh's family but, instead, a new council member for Piltover, Councilor Talus. Councilor Jace Talus. In recent years, the economy of the Undercity has surged, and the impoverished laborers from Undercity haven't even come to Upper City. Without them, many jobs were vacated at the docks. People from Piltover won't take those jobs, unless the wages are in large amounts of gold coins, but how is that possible? Indeed, in the past, hiring people from Undercity required just 1 gold coin for 3 years of labor, but now, for the same employment duration, it costs tens of times more money. Now, the people from Undercity are slowly slipping out of our control, and the main reason is Linwen. One of the council members exclaimed. It's because of his hextech phone. Around the round table, the sky was visible, with airships launching from the hex gate and soaring into the world at intervals. This had become a prominent feature of Piltover, and the city had profited greatly from it, with revenues nearly 100 times higher compared to a few years ago. The customs duties alone at the hex gates had soared. These achievements were largely attributed to the efforts of the new council member, Councilor Talus. The improved transportation and faster means of shipping had elevated Piltover, the already recognized center of world trade, to the heart of the world. Hextech technology had become an integral part of Piltover's identity. In pursuit of binding interests, Jace was elected as a council member shortly after the creation of the Hex Gates 2 years ago. Councilor Talus, I've repeatedly asked you about Linwen's whereabouts, but you've always given me an I don't know response, the portly council member frowned, looking at Jace. As fellow council members, we should strive for Piltover's future, but right now, you consistently side with the Zaunites. What are you doing? Jace sat in a corner between his 2 friendly council members, Councilor Kiraman and Councilor Mel. He stood up, leaning on the table, and said, I'm sorry, everyone. I genuinely don't know Linwen's whereabouts. He hasn't contacted me for a long time. You, Victor, and him, the 3 of you together created Hextech, and he used your Hextech technology to invent the Hextech phone. Your relationship doesn't need further explanation, does it? The portly council member squinted at Jace, continuing, I understand that you are doing this for your close friend, but Councilor Talus, Piltover needs to come first. Jace looked at him helplessly and replied, Linwen left Piltover several years ago and isn't in Zaun now. Victor can testify to this. Why did he hand over the Hextech phone to someone from Zaun instead of giving it to us? What's his purpose? Said the mechanical council member loudly. Jace looked at him and replied, because he is a Zaunite. It's evident from the fact that he never accepted support from any of the families. He has always considered himself a Zaunite. But he received an education in Piltover. The council member countered. You're mistaken, Councilor. Linwen worked as a laborer at school, not as a student. He never received any help from Piltover University. In fact, Linwen has helped us with many things. Professor Heimerdinger can vouch for this. The only person who claims to have taught Linwen is Zevi, but she has also disappeared with Linwen. Heimerdinger immediately raised his hand and added, yes, I can vouch for Jace. Linwen did not receive an education at the academy. The council member who had been speaking fell silent, but Councillor Kiraman stood up and said, but the Hextech phone cannot belong to a Zaunite, Jace. The income generated by this invention is no less than that of the Hex Gates. If he were a Piltover citizen, he could enjoy this income without issue. Piltover does not prevent anyone from pursuing their dreams. However, he is a Zaunite. You can see that he is scheming something with the money from this technology. For years, people from the upper city have been unable to enter Zaun at all. This isn't a reason for you to exploit Linwen. Can you ensure that he won't endanger Piltover, Councillor Talus? You can't. The councillor with the golden rings continued, you have assured us before that Zaun won't threaten Piltover. But now, the Zaunites are gaining autonomy, they refuse our control, and they don't even need our support anymore. Your good friend, Linwen, he handed over the process of making Hextech gems to the Zaunites. They now have their own Hextech gems. Isn't this your fault? Jace paused and then earnestly stated, Hextech technology was never meant to belong to me alone. It's the property of all Piltover citizens, and this technology has always been open and transparent. Victor and I never intended to monopolize it. We created Hextech for people to have better lives, so I don't mind others learning the craft of Hextech production. But instead, it's you all. Jace. Councillor Kiraman sternly interrupted him. She looked at Jace, shaking her head, and said, this is getting out of hand. Jace, that's enough. Councillor Mel also reached out to hold Jace's arm and gently shook her head, signaling Jace to sit down. Jace took a deep breath and complied, sitting back down. He wore an expression of discontent, looking at everyone present, and he spoke again, in any case, everyone, I genuinely don't know where Linwen is right now. If you want to find Linwen, then please go find him yourselves, Jace stated firmly. I am now Councillor Talus, not Jace Talus. So I ask you, respect me. Because that's also respecting yourselves. Chapter 58 Trust. After the council meeting, Jace returned to his laboratory, and not surprisingly, as soon as he opened the door, he saw a slender young man standing in the laboratory. Dressed in plain clothes, the person was standing in front of an apparatus, carefully examining something. The only person who could freely enter Jace's laboratory was, of course, Victor. At this moment, Victor was wearing Hextech goggles that amplified his vision, observing an oddly shaped Hextech gem. The strange Hextech gem was hovering in an electrical device, occasionally making a sound that seemed like breathing. To Jace and Victor, this Hextech gem had exceeded their original expectations, as it had undergone a transformation. This had been their most significant discovery in the past 2 years. They also found the reason it was different from other Hextech gems. It wasn't a crystal made by humans but was a gemstone brought from a distant desert land, a cave in Shurima. Originally, it was a strange irregular crystal. In other words, it was the original Hextech crystal. It's the original crystal, and it was the prototype for the Pharaoh's family to create artificial Hextech crystals. Jace slammed the door shut, making quite a loud noise, as if he were intentionally venting his anger. Victor didn't turn around, but he knew who it was. Victor's status was different now, he no longer needed investments from Piltover's families. It was no longer Victor begging them to invest, but the families pleading with Victor to let them invest. His current backing wasn't from a single family but from an entire city-state. In fact, when a certain someone initially created the Hextech phone, he had asked Jace if he wanted to put his name on it. But Mr. Talus declined due to issues of pride, rejecting this person's kindness. So the Hextech phone was divided into 3 parts, with Chief Engineer Zevi Retta taking a significant share, the founder Linwen getting the largest portion, and the smallest portion going to Victor as the namesake. Even so, Victor was incredibly wealthy today, he could even buy a bunch of houses in Piltover's affluent area. But he chose not to. Victor put all his money into developing Hextech technology because, to him, money was just a number now. Today, the Hextech phone had become an indispensable part of Piltover. This was also the main reason the council couldn't pressure Linwen directly but instead pushed Jace to convince Linwen to voluntarily hand over the Hextech phone. Piltover has its own rules, at least one of which is not to steal the inventions of others. This is the most important rule, or else Piltover would not have become the scientific city that all scientists aspire to. If Linwen were pushed too far and he stopped providing the needed energy for the Hextech phone to Piltover, the protests from the people of Piltover would be significant. Now, every Piltover resident is using the Hextech phone, and it has become an integral part of people's lives. It's incredibly convenient. Jace leaned against the wall, took a sip of water, and then spoke loudly. They're only interested in exploiting others, and they keep talking about working for a better future for Piltover. But in reality, every single one of them is just profiting for their own family. Even Miss Kiraman is the same. Jace covered his chin, leaning against the wall, and shook his other hand dismissively. I'm really ashamed to be associated with them. I've told you before, don't become a councilor. Jace, we're scientists, not politicians, Victor replied, turning around. He was still thin and frail, but thankfully, he had a healthy complexion. On Victor's shoulders, there were purple capes hanging on both sides, and around his neck, he wore a small pendant with a green bead on it. But, Victor, these years I've come to understand that becoming a councilor is not something I want to do, it's something I must do, Jace sighed. Otherwise, Hextech will be restricted by them, and I don't want Hextech to be under their control. The one thing I regret most now is that I didn't refuse the investment from the major families like Linwen did back then, Jace continued. Victor chuckled. If we had done that, our Hextech might still be in its infancy. After their conversation, the lab's door was knocked, and when Jace said, "Come in," an enforcer pushed the door open. It was the sheriff of Piltover, Marcus. Councilor Tallis, Councilor Mel is looking for you. Did she say why she wants to see me? Sorry, she only asked me to find you and conveyed her request to meet you. She didn't mention the reason. Victor waved from the side and said softly, Jace, go ahead. Attend to your duties. Sigh, Jace let out a heavy sigh. As he passed by Victor, he reached out and patted Victor's shoulder firmly. He looked down at Victor and said, sometimes, I envy you, my friend. I can't remember the last time I seriously conducted research. Also, if you get any word about Linwen, please inform me immediately. Victor nodded. I know what he's up to. I know what I need to do now. But that's not a reason for him to cut ties with me. There was a hint of sadness in Jace's eyes. He wasn't foolish. Over the years, he had been aware of Linwen's actions. Despite trying to pretend he didn't see, it was impossible with his current position. He knew why Linwen was avoiding him. It was because Linwen had wronged him. Jace certainly held a grudge against Linwen, but Piltover hadn't been harmed, and the city's progress had continued. The Hextech phone had brought significant benefits to Piltover. However, the inventor of this revolutionary invention had disappeared from Piltover and Zaun for almost 4 years now. He had been gone for so long that Jace's resentment had waned considerably. Jace. Victor turned his head, uncertain about what to say. Like the old days when they shared a bed and talked about their ideals during the night, those days were long gone. To prevent Jace from constantly being pressured by councilors, Linwen had chosen to leave both Zaun and Piltover. Initially, he would occasionally make a phone call to report on his safety, but recently, it had been over nearly 3 years without any contact. If Victor didn't know that Linwen was a superhuman, he might have thought he had perished out there. But Linwen was Linwen, he wouldn't die so easily. I'm leaving. When Jace saw Victor turn away, he decided not to say anything further and followed Sheriff Marcus. But just as Jace was walking away, Victor shouted after him, he won't harm you. Jace, Linwen may have wronged you, but it wasn't his intention. He won't hurt you. Victor. Jace stopped in his tracks and turned around to look at Victor. Victor, who had dedicated the first half of his life to invention and research, was still the same at the age of 30. He retained an pure heart. But Jace had already changed. The political whirlpool had transformed the man who once boasted of changing humanity and making everyone happy. I know, Jace replied, and then he followed Sheriff Marcus out of the laboratory. Won't harm me, hey? But on the day he returns, Victor, he might cause harm. Despite that, I still convince myself to believe him. In the world of politics, trust can be a rare commodity. Chapter 59 Doma and Linwen. To the north of Piltover lies the continent of Valoran, while to the south, there is a vast desert land called Shurima. This land, once named by a powerful empire, has now become fragmented and fallen from its former glory. Shurima is no longer as magnificent as it used to be, and its people suffer as a result. For many, the last Shuriman Emperor Azire has become known as a tyrant in the hearts of most Shurimans. In the northernmost part of the Shuriman continent, there is a human port city named Zaun. The Shuriman people who live here have suffered greatly, and many of them have lost faith in their former beliefs. Most of them sought refuge here due to the hardships in their homeland, and as a result, they have willingly joined the Noxian Empire for protection. At least in this way, they won't lose their lives in the vast desert due to bandits and dark mages. In this desert port city, the most prominent building is, of course, Noxstrata. This is one of the most famous structures of the Noxian Empire, second only to the Immortal Bastion. Whenever Noxus wins a war and conquers a place, they send their war engineers, who are top-notch engineers, scouts, and warriors. These war engineers construct massive black stone gates near the newly conquered areas. The presence of these towering stone gates dispels any doubts for passing travelers, making it clear who is in control of the territory. However, in Zaun, this port city known for its black market and wool trade, various fragmented factions exist as well. The Noxians do not shy away from conflict, in fact, they embrace it. The spirit of struggle runs deep in the Noxian creed. At this moment, in a chaotic marketplace in Zaun, a group of scavenging Shurimans is gathered in a corner, waiting for their employer. Dressed in breathable sun-proof garments, they each carry a long stick, a trusty companion for travel and a defensive weapon. Among them, Doma sits in the crowd of scavengers, sneaking a yawn. Eye crusts accumulate in the corners of his eyes, and he slaps his cheeks with both hands to stay awake. If an employer sees him half asleep, he, already facing a lack of trust due to his age, will be even less likely to be hired. As Doma forces himself to stay alert and scans the area for a potential employer, a robust black-haired young man appears before the team of scavengers. This immediately captures the attention of the scavengers. "Sir, please look at me. I've been scavenging in this place for many years. Just a few Noxian coins, a bag of water, and some rations are all I need. I'm willing to venture deep into the desert to search for ancient relics for you. Sir, I'm more robust than him. Sir, I have more experience in this field. Look at my physique." The black-haired young man points to his face with his fingers. His skin is very fair, in stark contrast to the locals who have rough and sun-darkened skin. Standing at about 1.8 meters tall, the young man with black hair looked a bit embarrassed as he said, "I'm sorry, everyone. I'm not here to hire people for searching ancient relics. I just wanted to ask you all something." How boring. There's no such thing as a free lunch." Upon hearing that the young man only had questions, the scavenging Shurimans immediately lost their earlier enthusiasm. They went back to their places, some clutching their stomachs, others squinting their eyes, and a few even preparing to take a nap. Only Doma remained standing, holding his wooden staff. He watched the black-haired young man, swallowed hard, and gripped his makeshift weapon. He looked as if he had a lot of money, just like those Noxians. Although his attire seemed no different from Doma's, tattered clothes and grass shoes, his body looked healthy. Especially the fair skin, a symbol that gave Doma an idea. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and now he just wanted a bite of food, any small portion would do. So, with his staff in hand, Doma approached the black-haired young man and whispered, "Sir, I've been in Zaun for nearly 2 years, and I know this place very well. If you have any questions, you can ask me." Seeing that the black-haired young man noticed him, Doma immediately stood up straight, puffing his meager chest, and said loudly, "I don't need much, sir. Just a bit of water or a piece of bread." "What's your name?" asked the black-haired young man, smiling, revealing a set of pearly white teeth. This made Doma even more convinced. Because healthy teeth are a symbol of wealthy individuals. The desert dwellers didn't have such good teeth. Even young Doma had cavities. "I'm Doma, sir. Follow me," he said to Doma. Doma didn't hesitate and immediately walked to the young man's side with his staff in hand. No one dared to kill without reason in Zaun because this was a territory occupied by Noxians. Noxian law allowed for disputes and brawls but absolutely forbade the senseless killing of the Empire's residents. In Zaun, no one dared to challenge the authority of the Noxians. This was also why the Shurimans of Shurima were willing to trust Noxus because they were indeed being protected. "Doma, is it? I'm Linwen. Mr. Linwen, what would you like to ask?" The black-haired young man was, in fact, Linwen. The Linwen learnt that Piltover had been searching for years. And now, Linwen, looking at Doma, thought for a moment, and then took out a water flask and a small bag from his backpack. Take it. No, sir, I haven't helped you yet. I can't take these. Linwen smiled and pushed the items into Doma's arms. This young boy didn't look that old, perhaps about the same age as Powder? Thinking about Powder made Linwen's heart warm. He shook his head and said, "It's all right, take it. I have a simple question for you." Doma swallowed hard, then decided to accept the items. He looked around before carefully putting them into his bag. He then gazed at Linwen, waiting for his question. The Fog Organization, Doma. There should be a small group called the Fog operating here in Zaun. I've been looking for it for a whole circle, and I can't find it. Wait, sir, what did you say? Doma looked surprised and exclaimed, "You want to find the Fog Organization? I advise you not to. They are too dangerous right now. You're a good person, and I can't let you get involved in this danger." Linwen was taken aback and hurriedly asked, "Danger?" Doma replied, "Yes, sir. The Fog Organization you mentioned, are they the group that sells mechanical devices? They've sold a lot of items, including some very expensive ones that Noxians really like." "That's right, Doma. I'm looking for them. But what do you mean by danger?" Linwen was getting anxious. He had been wandering in the Shurima desert and lost track of time and had left Zevi and the others in Zaun to fend for themselves. What if something happened to Zevi and the other Zaunites? He realized that Zevi was extremely important to him, as all his money came from Zevi's research. The energy for the Hex deck phones was also the result of Zevi's research and development. Now, the batteries had already reached their second generation. Zevi was important. Recently, a new gang has appeared in Zaun. If I'm not mistaken, the leaders should be the river folk. These two guys want to take over the Fog Organization. So, Mr. Linwen, it would be a mistake to join the Fog Organization, at least not right now because they have guns. Man, you scared me. I thought it was something serious, but just this? Gang conflict. Zaun is practically a haven for gangsters. Scared of a little fighting? Besides, despite not having any good weapons with him, given Piltover's technological level, that's already a formidable advantage in a world where guns are considered quite a setback. Guns? What's that, anyway? And not to mention, even if he stood in front of gunfire, it would surely hurt a bit, but getting injured? Ha, that's not going to happen. Taking a deep breath, he patted Doma on the shoulder and said, "It's all right, tell me the location of the Fog Organization." Doma hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said to Linwen, "Since I've accepted your things, I must personally guide you. The Sandfolk never go back on their word, and will abide by our agreement with the employer. Let's go." Doma tightened his grip on the stick in his hand and looked at Linwen. "This. All right, thank you." Linwen smiled at him. Following Doma for about an hour, Linwen and he arrived near the harbor. Looking at the tents enclosed by a fence in the distance, Doma exclaimed, "Sir, that's the Fog Organization, and those people are members of the Fog Organization. They're dangerous too." Observing the burly men that Doma pointed to from a distance, Linwen couldn't help but laugh. "I was wondering why I couldn't find it. We've already left Zaun." Linwen patted Doma on the shoulder and thanked him. "Thank you. Sir, sir." Doma wanted to advise this generous employer, but he had already walked towards the Fog Organization. For Doma, those burly men, almost 2 meters tall, well-built and armed, were extremely dangerous individuals. However, the scene that unfolded next left Doma dumbfounded. Doma saw that when the Fog Organization's doorman spotted the generous boss, they immediately surrounded him. However, they no longer had the usual look of shooing people away, but rather excitement on their faces. The boss was even smiling as he made his way towards one of them and patted him on the back. "This." Doma looked at the young man being surrounded and ushered into the tent. They're together. The young sandfolk figured out the reason. Chapter 60. Give me that phone. "Boss Linwen, where have you been for the past 2 years?" A burly Zaunite with a tough and menacing appearance sat in front of Linwen and respectfully inquired. Wearing new clothes, Linwen held a glass of malt whiskey, taking small sips, and with a smile, he replied, "I've been handling some business." "What kind of business could take 2 years?" Vander and Silco have been calling us constantly, urging you to come back. What do they need me for? Vander and Silco didn't say, but they wanted us to find you and get you back to Zaun as soon as possible. Linwen nodded and continued to drink while sharing stories with a few guys who had come with him from Zaun to the desert. Did those marauder brigands run away as soon as they saw you? Kind of, but unfortunately, I couldn't bring back a Scarlash. It's too hot-tempered. It takes more than strength, it takes time. I didn't have enough time, so I had to let it go in the end. It's probably someone's dinner now or caught by another band of raiders. Linwen shrugged. At that moment, the tent's flap was kicked open, and accompanied by a gruff growl, someone exclaimed, "You still know damn well to come back." It was one of Linwen's old friends. Wearing a lizard skin hat and dressed in a cool, airy gauzy outfit, Zivai's well-proportioned figure was on full display. While she shared the same dark skin tone as the desert dwellers, hers was a different kind of dark. The people in the desert had sun-darkened skin that was deep, dull, and lacked luster. But Zivai's complexion was naturally dark. As soon as she entered, she kicked Linwen in the chest. The impact sent Linwen stumbling, and Zivai slowly crouched down while clutching her foot. "Sorry, Zivai, I got lost in the desert," Linwen said apologetically as he looked at her. "Why didn't you call back?" Zivai gave Linwen an exasperated look, still catching her breath from the pain. Enduring the intense pain, she scrutinized Linwen from head to toe. Having not seen him for 2 years, she noticed that Linwen had grown taller, surpassing her in height. His facial features had become more attractive, and his body had become more robust. But to Zivai, Linwen was nothing more than a valuable tool for experimentation. She had devoted her life to science, and there was no room for romantic entanglements. She certainly had no intentions of developing feelings for Linwen, despite having known him for 7 years, seeing him every day. "That place had no signal," Linwen explained. "It's impossible. Your Hextech phone is custom-made, and it uses a unique gem as its core. Your Hextech phone is practically a mobile base station. Unless you ran to the very edge of the Shurima continent." "Wah, you crazy bastard!" Zivai looked at Linwen, who was embarrassed and clueless, then smacked herself in the face, pulling down her cheeks to make herself look ugly. She didn't care about appearances. Because she understood. "You really went to the edge of the Shurima continent?" Linwen nodded awkwardly. "All right, I can't be bothered to deal with you. Give me the Hextech phone." Linwen quickly handed a black long box to Zivai. "When you left, I told you to change the power source, but you didn't listen. You said you'd be back soon. Is this your definition of soon?" Zivai took the box and swiftly opened it. She rummaged through her gauzy skirt pocket and retrieved 2 small gems. "All the latest materials have been sent back to Zaun. How much longer are you planning to stay here?" Zivai asked as she replaced the power source for Linwen's Hextech phone. "We've been out for how many years?" Linwen asked. "Almost 4 years, Zivai quickly replied. "4 years, it's been quite a while," Linwen remarked. "Linwen, I don't want to get involved in your matters with Jace or the affairs of Zaun and Piltover. My family came to Piltover from elsewhere, so I have no attachment to Piltover. I don't care about which one becomes the city of progress. The only thing I care about is one thing. Don't harm innocent people." Taking out the darkened battery, Zivai replaced it with a new one and delivered this message. Linwen shrugged. "I know." He learned this gesture from Silco, though he couldn't recall when. It had become popular among his circle of friends. "All right." In less than 2 minutes, Zivai handed Linwen his Hextech phone. "By the way, I've heard some rumors that the fog might be facing some trouble recently," Linwen mentioned to Zivai. "Trouble?" "No trouble at all," Zivai said, sitting down on a stool and crossing her legs while supporting her chin with her hand. A perplexed Linwen asked, "Are you not concerned about the new gang in Zaun that's targeting the fog? Since you're back, what's the trouble?" Zivai rolled her eyes dramatically. "What trouble?" If it weren't for the fear of Noxian forces came knocking at their door, Zivai would have already sent someone to deal with the small gang. Their leader was nothing more than a fool with an oversized old-style double-barreled shotgun, accompanied by a few scrawny sandfolk and Bilgewater pirates. Did they really think they could take on the fog? Those damned Noxians had the audacity to claim a friendly relationship with Piltover. Every time she sent materials back to Zaun, the Noxians took their share, and it gave Zivai headache. Starting a few years ago, Zaun stopped purchasing materials from Piltover and began seeking materials to craft their own gemstones. While they couldn't use Piltover's hex gates, they were fortunate to be close to Shurima, where the materials for crafting hextech could be found in the seemingly impoverished desert region. This land was rich in countless ancient relics and mystical stones. After all, it had been the heart of the once glorious Shuriman Empire. In comparison to other major powers on Runeterra, such as the Noxian and Demacian empires, one could easily see the immense power and influence that Shurima once held. Even though Shurima had fallen, its territory was still as vast as the entire continent of Valoran. This indicated that there were many unexplored treasures left behind by the ancient empire in this desert region. Well, Linwen responded. After I make a phone call, I'll go take care of those matters, he added with a smile. You better do it, Zivi replied, clearly still displeased. Having followed her for 4 years and disappearing for 2 years in the middle, Linwen was well aware of Zivi's lingering resentment. So he could only grin foolishly. But his hands didn't stop moving. Dash. Dash. The City of Freedom, Zaun. In the year 980, Zaun declared formal autonomy. Without seeking approval from Piltover, the people of Zaun directly sealed off the elevator that connected them to the upper city, as well as the grand transportation corridors leading down from Piltover. In the year 984, after 6 years of development, Zaun underwent a significant transformation in its appearance. Although it still retained its post-apocalyptic, punk environment, many new and innovative buildings had sprung up. The faces of the Zaunites now bore more smiles. In Zaun, you could no longer see one alchemical factory after another, or endless stacks of toxic gas emissions. Instead, you could now see one shop after another, and countless Zaunites working to change the city's landscape. What you could see were towering spires that pierced the sky. These peculiar spires were constructed for air filtration, using hextech energy to purify the air. They absorbed metallic particles from the air and cleansed a significant amount of toxic gases. Although Zaun was still shrouded in smog and surrounded by pollutants, the city was indeed changing. The people of Zaun were united, living together in this city of freedom. Zaunites no longer needed to seek jobs in the upper city. With Zaun's booming economy and productivity, the city provided them with job opportunities and the means to lead decent lives. They didn't need to endure the insults and discrimination from Piltover residents, and if they could earn a livelihood for themselves and their families without going to the upper city, why would they bother? Even though the city was still plagued by smog and polluted water, it was their home. In the depths of the alleyways, formerly known as the Black Alley, now stood Zaun's council hall. The Kembaron from various districts and the 2 leaders of Zaun would often hold meetings here. Now, the Kembarons no longer oppose Vander's leadership. No one wants to live a difficult life, especially when they don't have to. Vander, there's a call. The Western Mine has been restructured into a facility for processing hextech gemstones. The person in charge of this facility is Black Kais, one of the first female Kembarons who pledged loyalty to Vander. Whose call is it this time? In a brightly lit hall, Vander, dressed in a sweatshirt, was busy examining documents. He replied with a hint of annoyance, if they're looking to purchase hextech phones and resources, tell them to contact Silco. They shouldn't be dialing the central hall's phone all the time. I already have enough on my plate. But Vander, this is a call from an unknown number. Black Kais looked at the hextech phone's screen, displaying a string of digits, and added, it's an unfamiliar number. Vander sighed, unknown numbers don't need to be brought to my attention. Black Kais, you have a hextech phone too, haven't you received calls from strange people before? Every month, a few individuals misdial. It's a perfectly normal occurrence. He then lowered his head to examine yet another message that had just arrived. He felt the urge to smash the table in front of him. Buy weapons? Why would you purchase weapons from us when you can get them in Piltover? Alchemical weapons? Zaun no longer produces alchemical toxins. Is this not a veiled threat? Asking the alchemical scientists of Zaun to create powerful biochemical weapons? Now the best scientists of Zaun are teachers. Now, Singed is dividing his attention between Shimmer and Hextech, serving as the headmaster of the Academy of Zaun. Although his students number fewer than a few hundred, it's because there aren't as many orphans in Zaun these years. The lives of the Zaunites have slowly improved. I'm aware of that, but there's something odd about this phone number, Black Kais mumbled. What's wrong with it? Vander asked. This phone number, it's 000003. Quick. Give. Me. That. Phone. Vander roared in frustration. Chapter 61 How are they? Vander snatched the phone from Blackist's hand and looked at the number. He was incredibly excited. He had been waiting this number for several years. He immediately pressed the blue answer button and placed the phone against his ear, loudly exclaiming, Linwen? Linwen? Is that you, Linwen? Black Kais, who stood nearby, was startled. No wonder Vander was so excited. If she had known that this was Linwen on the other end, she would have been equally thrilled. She now knew that Linwen was both the enforcer of the Undercity and the true future leader of Zaun. Zaun's current situation owed a great deal to Linwen's efforts. So, she discreetly listened in on the conversation. Good afternoon, Vander, it's so great to hear your voice again. You sound quite energetic. It seems you've been doing well lately, a clean and hearty voice replied. Black Kais found the voice somewhat unfamiliar, but then she chuckled to herself. After all, it was impossible for things to remain the same. Linwen had gone through significant changes. Their last conversation was many years ago. Linwen had grown from a 17-year-old boy into a mature man during his time away. Vander couldn't help but burst into laughter. He leaned on his desk, holding the phone, and angrily shouted into it, What's going on? How could you just disappear for so long? 4 years, Linwen, it's been 4 years since you left. You promised to come back after 1 or 2 years and said you'd keep calling to reassure us. But in reality, what did you do? Vander questioned. Sorry, Vander, it's not entirely by choice. I wanted to make those calls, but many things didn't go as planned, Linwen replied with a hint of helplessness in his tone. He had experienced things in Shurima these years that no one would believe if he shared them. Really, no one would believe him. Anyway, where are you now? Vander asked. I'm in Zaun, Linwen responded. You rascal, when are you going to return? I have one more thing to do, Vander. After I finish that, I'll be back. Sorry for the inconvenience, he said apologetically, but his tone was filled with amusement. Listening to Linwen's voice, why does he sound so amused, Vander thought to himself. It seems like you've got to work a bit harder for a while. But at the latest, next year, I'll return, don't worry. You better be back next year. It's already August now, and there are only 4 months left. I hope to see you on this year's Progress Day, Vander continued. And Linwen, during these years when you didn't send any messages, we've successfully cut all ties with Piltover. Now, Zaun no longer needs to depend on Piltover. Doesn't doing this create trouble with Piltover? Linwen asked. Of course, it causes some trouble. They've banned the use of hex gates by Zaunites, refused to sell us food and materials, and they've been trying to keep outside scientists who want to join Zaun out of Piltover, Vander shrugged, a hint of amusement in his voice. But these are all minor issues. As long as you have money, you can have anything. Piltover won't sell us food and resources, but Nakus will. Vander chuckled. Those Pilties wouldn't dare to mess with Noxians. Last time we were invited to build a station in the Immortal Bastion by Nakus, Linwen, just setting up a station there provided us with plenty of iron and food, Vander explained. It seems like Silco's doing a great job, Linwen commented. Hearing Silco's name, Black Kais nodded to herself. Currently, external matters for Zaun were handled by Silco, while Vander focused on Zaun's internal affairs. Together, they had led Zaun's development to great success. By the way, Vander, did you find the person I asked you to look for? Linwen inquired. I'm sorry about this, Linwen. The person you're looking for should have already gone to Piltover, Vander replied. Linwen immediately replied with a smile, It's okay, Vander. This was expected, and I was only trying. Seraphine parents are both Zaunites, yet she moved to Piltover with them at a young age to become part of a craftsman family in Piltover. Her parents make a living with their skills. Although they aren't wealthy, they have a decent life. Linwen had intended to find her as she could be a valuable help in communicating with the Brack Kern. But now, it looks like I can let it go. People have their own destinies. Linwen asked more questions, including how his friends in Piltover were doing. Vander shared all the information he knew with Linwen. Shortly after Linwen's disappearance, Jace Talus became a new councilor in Piltover. He proposed a trade with Zaun, and other councilors agreed to his request to earn money with the Zaunites. They agreed to let Zaunites use Hextech but under the condition that Zaun would comply with Piltover's regulations and that Linwen would surrender a portion of the Hextech phone shares. However, Silco vehemently rejected this offer. He was not a weak-willed person and, even with the improved quality of life in Zaun, he remained true to his principles. Compromise was not a word in his dictionary, at least not at this moment. They're still acting all high and mighty, aren't they? They clearly have their eyes on the benefits of Hextech phones and a global trading network. Linwen shook his head, feeling both amused and exasperated. The benefits of Hextech phones were indeed substantial, but even more significant was that every country, whether a large empire or a small nation, wanted such a valuable technology. To use Hextech phones, they all needed Hextech stations. Currently, Zaun was the only one that had Hextech stations to store all the data from Hextech phones. As a result, under Silco's leadership, Zaun had established friendly relationships with many cities. However, Piltover remained proud and arrogant. They still thought of Zaun as the old Zaun. Did they think they could just knead and mold it as they pleased, showing off their condescending charity? But Linwen, your friend, the councilor, genuinely wants to maintain the relationship between the two cities. He has been working to change Piltover's perception of Zaunites during his time in office. However, so far, it hasn't yielded much result. Vander paused, then continued, and Silco never agrees to any form of aid from Piltover. Vander explained. Linwen is an emotional person, and Vander had his concerns about Linwen being dissatisfied with the situation. However, Linwen remained steadfast, saying, Silco has done an excellent job. Over these years in Shurima, I've witnessed so much, Vander. I've come to trust everything Silco does, Linwen added. Vander agreed, then Linwen whispered, by the way, Vander, how about Powder and Six? How are they? I initially tried calling them, but no one answered. Vander couldn't help but laugh and said, I thought you could hold back from asking about them. You brat, so you still remember Powder and Six, hey? They're doing well now, you don't need to worry too much about them. They've both found things they enjoy. Linwen muttered, how could I not worry? Well, if you're worried, you better come back soon. All right. Since I can't reach them now, I'll just contact them later tonight, Linwen cheerfully suggested. I have some minor matters to attend to, so please help me tell Powder and Six to keep their phones ready. I'll call them later. Vander rubbed his long, unruly hair and nodded, saying, I understand. Take care, Linwen. Don't worry. Chapter 62-6, Stay as calm as I do. And just under 3 minutes after Vander hung up the phone, the grand entrance to the hall was pushed open forcefully. A person dressed in a stylish red suit with a trim physique, yet exuding elegance, entered. An anxious expression adorned his face. He pushed the door open and immediately exclaimed, Linwen. He then saw Vander, leaning against a long table and looking at him with folded arms. He hung up. He asked. Vander shrugged and nodded, saying, Yup. Damn it, why did you let him hang up? Don't you know I have many things to discuss with him? The person who rushed in was none other than Silco, one of the leaders of Zaun. Interestingly, Silco had applied intricate makeup to his face, a stark departure from his usual fierce appearance. Presently, Silco looked like an accomplished politician, which indeed he was. However, this politician had a very sour mood. So much to tell him, numerous matters to discuss and initiate upon his return, and you just hung up the phone like that? Aren't you afraid he'll disappear for another few years? Silco scolded. Not at all. He said he guarantees he'll be back before Progress Day. Really? Silco paused. When have I ever lied to you, brother? Silco pointed his finger at Vander's face and retorted, Vander, spare me your empty words. Have you not deceived me enough already? You told me back then that Linwen was only going out to find materials with some people. That's the only reason I allowed him to leave Zaun. But does finding materials require 4 years outside? Vander, you have played a significant role in all of this. Vander awkwardly chuckled. Anyway, what did you tell him? Vander proceeded to share all the details of his conversation with Linwen with Silco, holding nothing back. Indeed. Rather than saying he called you, it's more accurate to say he could only call you. Just because your 2 precious daughters won't answer the phone. But Silco found it amusing to think that once the girls found out about this, they would undoubtedly be fuming. Vander, as the leader of Zaun, was responsible for managing internal affairs. However, considering the multitude of issues in present-day Zaun, he had quite a load on his plate. In fact, Silco's workload was nearly twice as much as Vander's. Working more and resting less had significantly affected Silco's temper over the years. His patience had worn thin. "What is Six doing now?" Vander suddenly asked. Silco first rolled his eyes in a cold and disdainful manner, then quipped, "Your precious daughter should be out on the streets arresting people right now, primarily our big clients." "She's quite something, Vander," Silco teased. "Silco, I hope you don't hold too much grudge against Six. She's helping us. She has indeed caught a few illegal immigrants and even exposed some spies coming down from above, but, Vander," Silco squinted his eyes, "how many times has she arrested the wrong person through violent enforcement? 1 success and 4 to 5 mistakes, is that still considered helpful?" When the conversation shifted to the girl with pink hair, Silco became noticeably irritated. She disliked Silco, and he wasn't fond of her either, mainly because she resembled Vander so much but carried traces of Linwen at the same time. This made her highly unlikable in Silco's eyes. "Thanks to her, our business profits have decreased by 10%. Do you realize how much you can do with that 10%? Vander fell silent immediately. But Silco continued to complain. "Can't she learn from her sister? Be a quiet girl, engage in some peaceful inventions, isn't that better?" Vander, who was initially playing dead, couldn't help but retort, "Quiet? Can you really call what Powder does is quiet? What's your perspective? What, are you disagreeing with me?" Silco raised an eyebrow, looking at Vander. Vander's teaching methods that produced such a genius daughter were truly a mystery to him. Of course, the girl with pink hair doesn't count, she's just a brawler, much like Vander. I agree, Vander replied with a wry smile. It's unclear why, but although both are Vander's daughters, one is at odds with Silco, while the other has a good relationship with him. The key issue is that the two sisters also have an exceptionally strong bond. Six and Powder are biological sisters who have grown up together, and Six, the elder sister, dotes on Powder. Powder also trusts and adores her elder sister. So what's really going on here? Sometimes, interpersonal relationships are just that complicated. Powder has become one of Singed's top apprentices with Echo. Echo even holds a position as a lecturer at one of Zaun's schools, while Powder. She's a mentor in the field of weapon crafting. Silco ordered the establishment of Zaun's weapon division, dedicated to the research and development of weapons unique to the Zaunites. Powder, alongside several veteran mechanical mentors from Zaun's past, formed the Zaun weapon division with her as the leader. Yes, a 17-year-old girl is leading a group of elderly gentlemen. However, no one dares to say otherwise because Powder has an abundance of innovative ideas in weapon crafting, making her a prodigious talent in this field, even surpassing Echo in weapon crafting. Her talents even amaze Singed, a biochemist. Powder the child of firepower. Black Kais, go tell Powder that Linwen called, Silco said, raising his hands in a helpless gesture. He thought that if they didn't inform her, she'd surely get upset later. The two sisters were quite similar when it came to matters related to Linwen. "Yes, Silco, sir," Black Kais promptly nodded. "Oh, and please inform Six as well," Vander added. "No problem, sir." On Zaun's Freedom Avenue, you could already see several material shops lining its sides. It might not compare to Piltover's illustrious Sun Gates, but it still made the Zaunites proud, as it was the result of years of hard work and development. Now, on this bustling street, a figure was fleeing rapidly. "Hey, aren't you going to do anything?" A person from another country exclaimed in surprise, watching the scene. "Is that a thief? Aren't you going to catch him?" The shopkeeper grinned and retrieved a beautiful piece of metal from the counter. "No need. Six will take care of him." "Six? Who's that?" asked the merchant visiting the Undercity for the second time. "Ah, I just mentioned her, and here she is. Look, that's Six." The shopkeeper pointed towards a specific direction, and the merchant turned to see another swift figure dashing out. Describing her as faster than flying would be accurate. When you looked closer, you could see that she was riding Zaun's unique Hextech hoverboard. She wore a stylish blue cap, somewhat resembling the hats of the topside enforcers. The cap had a bunch of beautiful pink hair peeking out from underneath, playfully swaying with the wind. Her striking features were scrunched up with excitement, but it only added to her attractive fierceness. On her upper body, she had on a blue shirt that was straining to contain the top buttons, giving a tantalizing impression. She also wore an emblem jacket with the potion bottle emblem, which the merchant recognized as Zaun's city emblem. Many places in Zaun featured this lovely potion bottle insignia. For her lower half, she wore a custom-made blue skirt made from what appeared to be high-quality material. Yet, shamefully, she had on black pants underneath. Who taught her to dress like that? Thankfully, the pants were tight-fitting, accentuating her powerful thighs, making them look particularly appealing. Her gorgeous long legs were poised on the hextech hoverboard, and her hands, adorned with peculiar gauntlets, were pointing forward. She was shouting loudly, "Criminal ahead! As a Undercity enforcer, I'll give you one last warning. Please refrain from further resistance, or face the consequences." "Wait, she's a policewoman from Zaun." The merchant was a bit perplexed. "She's an enforcer, sir. She's an enforcer from our Undercity." The shopkeeper replied with a gleeful grin. Over there, a shout rang out once more, and she had already caught up to the criminal. "I told you not to run!" she exclaimed. "You bastard! Can't you understand what I'm saying? Hey? Fu *ku!" Boom! Accompanied by a furious curse, she leaped high into the air and then slammed her heavily gauntleted hand onto the ground. Following that, an explosion occurred in front of her. This left the merchant standing in place, utterly panicked. On his second visit to Zaun, he had encountered an explosion. No wonder the topsiders had warned them not to go down, saying it was dangerous. It truly seemed perilous. The shockwave even blew his hair into the air. When the smoke cleared, the merchant saw the beautiful enforcer, no, the enforcer woman. She was standing on the sunken street, with Zaunites nonchalantly going about their business around her. Were they just used to this? She didn't seem to have attacked the criminal directly, or else, judging by the several meters deep crater, wouldn't it have turned the person into mush? "Hey, buddy, welcome to Zaun," she said as she approached the merchant while carrying the unconscious criminal, flashing him a smile. Then, Thank you, thank you. You're welcome, but please make sure to follow the rules of Zaun, and don't engage in any illegal activities, or I might have to cuff you." She smiled, revealing a set of beautiful teeth, with a naturally lovely face unadorned with cosmetics but still radiating beauty. Up close, it was clear that her figure was indeed remarkable, like a beautiful and powerful leopard. Can I? Seeing her smile, the merchant conveniently chose to forget all about the things she had done earlier. He now only wanted to have dinner with her and get to know this beautiful enforcer better. But before he could make a move, they heard a sound from the sky, and another enforcer flew over. 666. Milo, what's with all the shouting? I've got the guy, don't worry. He's not dead, I made sure to go easy on him. 6 looked at the tall, skinny young man who had descended from the sky on a hextech hoverboard. She had also planned to use the hoverboard to take the criminal to the enforcer precinct in Zaun. 6 couldn't help but admire how capable Echo was. This hextech hoverboard was incredibly convenient. Thinking so, 6 stepped onto her hoverboard, holding the unconscious criminal, and said to Milo in the distance, "As I've said, as enforcers of Zaun, we need to stay calm and composed at all times. You need to be a bit more stable. Why can't you learn from me and stay as calm as I do?" Milo, however, couldn't care less and shouted, "Big bro!" Linwen called back. Swoosh! A figure shot through the air, and instinctively, Milo reached out his hand, catching the criminal that 6 had previously apprehended. And 6? The one that had told him to be more stable and calm earlier was now putting the pedal to the metal, leaving only a beautiful silhouette in her wake. Milo! Is she really going to teach me like this? Chapter 63 Grown Up. At the same time, as a violent pink-haired enforcer girl in the Undercity finished her patrol, she was flying on her hextech hoverboard board toward the Zaunite Council Hall. Ascending alongside the Ritevun Tower, she arrived at the middle level of Zaun. The buildings in this area were close to the tower, benefiting from better air quality since the Ritevun Tower was the air-purifying device of Zaun. This is where Zaun's school was located. To provide the best learning and growing environment for Zaun's children, Silco had spared no expense. He and Vander were currently working in the smog-filled depths of the Undercity. At this moment, inside Zaun's school, there was a door that stood out, distinctly different from the others in terms of artistic style. This door was adorned with various graffiti patterns, all in a cute style with primarily blue and purple tones. Occasionally, you could even see pink crabs and a shadowy figure in a white cloak. Hanging on this door was a "Do Not Disturb" sign. Approaching the door, one could hear the sound of clanging and tinkering, along with pleasant music and a girl singing in a lively and cheerful manner. Upon entering the room, you could see a unique radio set placed in the corner. The display screen indicated the currently playing track. It was evident that the music was coming from this device. In the center of the room, under bright purple lights, sat a girl with two extremely exaggerated long braids. She was sitting cross-legged, her head lowered as it swayed to the music, expressing joy in every direction. Her hands were also busy, energetically wielding a wrench to strike something. The clanging and banging sound was coming from her. When you looked at her face from the front, you would see she was wearing oversized copper goggles. Her eyes were completely concealed by the goggles, and the delicate, small nose was firmly pressed by the copper frame. Her upturned little nose was slightly reddened, and it glistened with a hint of sweat that hadn't been wiped away. Her enticing red lips were lightly pursed, and she continued to hum a song. However, upon closer listening, you would realize she was singing randomly, completely out of tune. Da-la-da-day, da-da-da-la-la. Woo, wow, who am I? I'm me, your lovely Powder. And the gentleman beside me is my good buddy, Clacky. Thank you all for the applause. She picked up a small piece of metal in front of her, placed it on the ground, stuck out a little pink tongue, and then forcefully raised the large wrench in her hand. In the next moment, she slammed it down with a loud clang. Whoa! Then she bent her body and let out a soft goo-goo sound. Her body gradually went limp, and she lay down on the ground, still holding the hand that had been trembling from wielding the wrench. She lightly rubbed her face on the ground, unconcerned about the dirt. In front of her lay an unfinished iron piece, but someone had clearly lost patience. She had no intention of continuing her work. Doing anything was driven by her passion and love, not a particular purpose. Whatever she did, it was done at her own whim. Just like now, the long-haired blue-haired girl grew impatient. She rubbed her face against the ground, waiting for her wrist to recover, and suddenly thought about dinner. What should I have for dinner tonight? She began to mutter to herself. I don't want to eat Six's cooking anymore. If that's the case, I'd rather cook for myself. It's just a matter of cooking over a fire, I can learn it. Silco and Vander have been too busy lately. If only Silco could cook for me. Oh, right. Sevika can cook too. Even though she's really annoying, like a big sister, her cooking is so much better than Six's. No, even Clagger's food tastes better than Six's. Haha, to be honest, I feel like even a random rat could toss a few times in a pan and make something tastier than what Six cooks. How does she do it? How can she turn good food into something so unappetizing? The girl sitting on the ground, waiting for her wrist to stop tingling, was none other than Six's sister, Powder, who had braids almost as tall as herself. Once her hand felt better, Powder lifted her body, performing a graceful somersault. However, whoa! Unaware of the long braid at her feet, Powder's bare foot stepped on it. Her footing slipped, pulling her own scalp in the process, and she fell heavily on her bottom. Ouch! She rubbed her behind with one hand and grabbed the table to slowly get up, letting out a painful exclamation. And immediately, there was a knocking on the door with an anxious voice. Department head? Are you all right? Oh, it's nothing. I just had a little fall, said Powder, avoiding any embarrassment by not admitting the truth. So she quickly put on her shoes and replied with a cheerful tone, please don't come in. My invention is at a critical moment, it's super duper dangerous. Yes. But just now, the Black Kais Baroness called. She has something urgent to convey on behalf of Lord Silco. What does he want from me again? Powder tilted her head, wearing her tall boots. As she began to lace them up, she muttered, now, it should absolutely not be dinner time, right? It seems to be someone you know. Someone I know? Oh, wow, someone I know. I don't really have many acquaintances, you know? Haha, I only have a few close friends. Powder chuckled self-deprecatingly. Her friends were just a handful: Milo, Clagger, Echo, Silco, well, that's about it, just those few. Six was family, and Vander was family too. Ah, it seems like someone has been forgotten. But he deserved it. This is Powder's punishment for him. He's been away for so long, didn't even know to call back, and disappeared inexplicably. Doesn't he know I'd miss him? With her boots on, Powder stood up and leaped 3 times in a row. I don't know him, but the Black Ice lady sounded very excited. They said it's someone named Linwen who tried to call you, the girl outside the door said loudly. Linwen? Who's Linwen? The girl genuinely had no idea. But from the way the Black Ice lady spoke, she thought he must be someone very important to Zaun. So, despite the department head's eccentric personality, it was best to clarify this matter. Who did you say? From inside the room, there were heavy footsteps, accompanied by the sound of someone breathing heavily. Linwen, someone named Linwen. And then what she heard were loud banging sounds. Is she searching for something? Then, she heard department head Powder's loud exclamation, why the hell didn't I answer the phone? Inside the room, holding her Hextech phone, Powder noticed a notification on the screen. It was a call from 000003. And she didn't answer it. Oh my god, what have I done? Chapter 64 Monster. Belzuan, Linwen, who had hung up the phone, stretched his body and turned to look at Zevi sitting beside him. Where are they? Linwen asked Zevi. In a alley in the Sandwell Market. Once you get there, I believe you can distinguish them. After all, the characteristics of the Bilgewater people are quite obvious, Zevi casually replied. Then she asked Linwen, are you planning to go find them now? Why so impatient? The sooner, the better. After I wake up from a nap, I still have some things to take care of, Linwen said with a smile. You're really busy, Mr. Busy Man, Zevi said. Linwen shrugged, neither accepting nor denying it. Indeed, he had quite a few things to attend to. After resolving Zevi's little trouble, Linwen would head east towards Shurima. To become stronger, Linwen needed to find various champions, befriend them, and improve their favorability. He had spent over a decade in Piltover and Zaun, already befriending most of the champions there. Now, Linwen was heading east, near Ikathia, to seek new allies. He believed it was time for her to emerge. She might currently be hiding, fighting void creatures while digging soil to eat. After all, from the perspective of Shurima nomads, she was also a void creature. Linwen Laurent had such thoughts. Stepping out of the tent and heading towards the market of Belzuan, Zevi didn't stop him. On the way, Linwen continued pondering. In the current timeline, if there were no major changes, the year 984 would be when Nakus invaded Ionia. 2 years later, Swain would be sent back to Nakus due to having his arm severed by Irelia. However, 3 years later, Swain would seize Noxian political power, establishing the Triferix and a new Noxian empire. With this, significant events were on the horizon. With the rise of the Crow, a series of events would unfold, far from the ease Linwen experienced a few years earlier. Zeroth, Azire, Tryndamere, Atrox, Orn, Braum, and the notably high-profile but uneventful Mordekaiser. In summary, Linwen needed to prepare for major events. Prepare for preventing significant incidents. The reason Linwen didn't choose Ionia was that it was currently an inhospitable place. Honestly, even though Linwen is now a super monster, navigating Ionia still requires him significant caution, as the place is too mysterious and strange. Unlike Shurima, although there are many dangers, and some individuals are even more dangerous than in Ionia, you can at least communicate with the folks here. In that weird place called Ionia, even stepping on a root could make the grass jump up to attack you. Can you believe it? Not to mention the various religious sects standing tall, some communicative, while others are completely incomprehensible. It's like a cluster of diodes. Despite being high in mages, warriors, and marksmen, everyone seems to be playing poorly. They'd rather have a civil war amongst themselves than contribute to their homeland. This led to a country full of monsters of a champion getting chopped down by Noxian soldiers, reaching the Presqu'Île, which Linwen recalls as an important place in Ionia, perhaps like Piltover's Piltover University? Yeah, it's the sacred institution of the birthplace of the First Lands. Then a bunch of Ionians just watched as Noxian forces invaded their sacred land. Ha, so that place should really undergo its own reform. But Linwen won't bother. Despite liking Irelia, Sana, Lee Sin, Master Yi, and other champions before coming to this world, after more than 10 years here, Linwen's affection for those heroes has dissipated. Linwen never thought he could interact with all the champions on Runeterra. After all, events in this world happen concurrently. While he's doing various stuff in Shurima, Nakus is already invading Ionia. Meanwhile, they're also dealing with small tribes of Fruljord in the north and fighting Demacia's forces to the west. Can Linwen handle it all? Can he travel the world like Rise and be a savior, a peacemaker? Obviously not. Let's not even mention that Linwen doesn't have Rise's teleportation magic. Even if he had such teleportation abilities, Linwen wouldn't be able to participate in everything. Therefore, Linwen has learned to let go. Irelia is indeed someone he admired, and well, there's few players who enjoy League of Legends that don't like Irelia. But now, Linwen's favorites are Six and Powder. Even Irelia, in Linwen's heart, doesn't weigh as much as Clagger and Milo. Because she's a stranger Linwen hasn't encountered. As Linwen thinks about this, he quickly arrives at the market as mentioned by Zevi. Just as Zevi said, Linwen sees the Bilgewater people mingling with the Shurimans. Are they the gang Zevi mentioned? By the way, people from Bilgewater are quite recognizable due to their tattoos and distinctive attire, especially the facial tattoos shaped like sun discs or octopus tentacles. These tattoos likely have a significant connection to their local deities. Linwen looks at the Bilgewater folks blocking the alley. That should be the spot Zevi mentioned. Linwen approaches, walking through the lively crowd, facing the Bilgewater people at the alley. Before they notice Linwen's move, he suddenly flashes within the crowd. The next moment, he appears behind the Bilgewater folks. In an instant, 3 Bilgewater ruffians roll their eyes, silent, and slump against the wall, unconscious. Linwen continues walking forward, leaving behind 3 Bilgewater folks seemingly dozing off against the wall. None of this goes unnoticed. In the depths of the alley, Linwen silently opens his own status panel, a hint of pride flashing across his face. Player, Linwen. Age, 21. Level, 41. Strength, 711. Agility, 501. Intelligence, 661. Psi, 0. Skills, Advanced Repair, Advanced Swordsmanship, Relentless Force, Mastered, Zephyr, Flesh Sanctification, Second Wind, Wind Magic, Mastery, Elemental Mastery. Champion Cards. Demolition Diva. Piltover Enforcer. Time Tinkerer. Machine Herald. Revered Inventor. Mad Chemist. Defender of Tomorrow. Storm's Fury. Items. Chrono Ring, 10 meters. Duran's Blade. Red Potion X3. Damaged Unknown Rune Fragment X3. Serrated Dirk. Elixir of Iron. Berserker's Greaves. Remaining lottery chances, 0. This is Linwen's current status. He's now a person with all 3 attributes exceeding 500. Linwen can no longer be called human. Have you ever seen a flying human? Yes, Linwen can fly. He is a true monster now. Comment. 0 comment. Vote. Chapter 65-65 Good afternoon. Linwen walked along the alley until he almost reached the end before stopping. Upon hearing the commotion from around the corner of the alley, Linwen pressed against the wall, closed his eyes, and listened intently. After standing there for a good 3 minutes without being noticed, Linwen shook his head in self-amusement and chuckled. It's been a long time since he did something like this. The last time he engaged in such activities was when he was called the Undercity Enforcer in Zaun. Now, is Linwen going back to his old ways? Traditional skills are indeed invaluable. But to be honest, the quality of these thugs is noticeably lower, nothing compared to the folks in Zaun. Although they are just street thugs, the people in Zaun, for the most part, have put life and death aside. With a gentle press of his hands downward, accompanied by a breeze rising from under his feet, Linwen's body slowly floated up. He then effortlessly drifted into the air, concealing his presence, and flew into the alley. Inside the alley, a group of local Belzoan sand dwellers, along with a seemingly tough group of outsiders, sat huddled together on a large piece of tattered cloth. Sitting in the middle, hands swiftly moving over the cards, was a thin and weak-looking young man, appearing honest and simple on the surface but with a sly glint in his eyes. Come, you can now bet big or small. My friends, as long as you win, you won't have to scavenge the dangerous desert for days. And if you lose, you can always borrow money to continue. After all, I believe there will be a moment when the goddess of luck will favor you, right? Nearby, a stout and stocky figure displayed various items recently collected, belongings of the scavengers gambling on the cloth. My friends, we accept various currencies, whether it's Noxian coins, Piltover's currency, or your currency from Shurima, we take them all. But if you have items, you can sell them to us at a fair price. Bilgewater folks don't deceive people. Deception is shameful, and as Bilgewater residents from a powerful maritime nation, deceiving is considered a crime punishable by beheading. The stout man continued, and of course, Bilgewater has its own currency. Look, this is the golden kraken coin, this is the silver serpent coin, and here is a copper herring coin. You can rest assured that Bilgewater money is universally accepted worldwide. Do you know Nakos? Even they use our money. The stout man shouted with enthusiasm, spitting saliva as he emphasized his point. It's evident that this is a small gambling den established in the Zaun market. But in Zaun, it's not an unusual occurrence. After all, Zaun is a poor place, and consequently, the local gangs have only a few ways to make a profit. They either rely on theft and robbery or establish small gambling spots, taverns, or brothels using women taken by force. The reason for such customs is likely related to the fact that the local scavengers in Shurima are always living on the edge, dealing with life-threatening situations. Most scavengers live day by day, so living each day is already a victory. Therefore, seeking excitement to make life more interesting becomes essential for them. Gambling and pleasure serve as the best means of excitement for scavengers. Not far from this small gambling spot, a medium-sized tent is set up. Inside the tent, two young men are having a conversation. Tobias, I think we should take action. You've been observing for too many days, and we can't delay any longer. Please call me Twisted. Never use my other name outside. I get it, Tobias. But did you listen to what I said? You've been observing for too many days, and those guys have noticed our movements. If we don't act now, it might be too late once they become cautious. I said, call me Twisted. Helplessly, Twisted said to the strong man in front of him. Twisted leaned back in a reclining chair, exerting force on his toes, gradually tilting backward. With a faint smile on his face, he softly said, as for what you mentioned about being cautious, they've been wary of us for a long time. What do you mean? Are you saying they already know we're planning to steal from them? No, I don't know about that. Twisted extended his hand, and with a slight movement of his slender fingers, a card the size of an adult's palm was caught between his index and middle fingers. Swoosh! He flipped his wrist, and the card kept spinning, adhering to his palm. In the eyes of the Fogs, we're just a gang of bandits without much vision, a bunch of fools who are used to robbing at sea and still think highly of themselves on land. Can't you speak normally? Why are you always so mysterious? Can't you straighten out that broken tongue of yours? Tristan sighed and said to the man in front of him, Graves, I really hope you can use your brain. Do you really think those Noxians don't care about the Fogs? They are well aware of it. Graves puffed up his big mustache, holding a gun like a goofy guy, and continued, if you say they're on good terms with the Noxians, why don't they seek help from those officers? If they step in, won't we just have to run away immediately? Because of money, my friend. Seeking help from the Noxian officers comes at a cost far exceeding what they would need to deal with the consequences we might bring. Noxians are greedier than us, you know that. Twisted smiled and said. So, what should we do next? I don't understand much about this, so I'll follow your lead. The not-so-bright big-bearded man, Graves, sat on the ground with crossed legs, holding his double-barrel gun, and loudly declared, we've always done things this way, right? Yes, brother, just like always. Twisted nodded and then picked up a wine glass from the nearby wooden table. After taking a sip, he looked at Graves and continued, this time, if we can really steal those materials and take away those Hextech phones, Graves, I think we won't need to come out for at least 2 years. Are those things really that valuable? Until now, Graves had no idea what was so good about those small boxes. Of course, those are Hextech phones. Even that Plank has been wanting one for a long time. Graves nodded in confusion. Anyway, the two of them had always been like this. Whatever his brother said, he would follow suit. However, Twisted looked up at the outside of the tent. It seems we have new friends. Understanding Twisted's meaning after cooperating for many years, Graves, holding his gun, immediately started cursing as he was about to step out of the tent. Who the foo *k dares to cause trouble on my turf? But as he lifted the tent with the gun barrel, he let out a miserable cry of woe. And was sent flying. What the foo? Graves, still a bit dizzy, cursed while lying on the ground. Twisted was nearby, having dodged the commotion. The corner of the tent was lifted, revealing a handsome young man with black hair. With a wry smile, he looked at Twisted and Graves. He spoke, "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Linwen, the leader of the Fog Organization." Chapter 66 Twisted Fate's Magic. Everyone outside had already been dealt with by Linwen. Those small-time thugs, lacking decent weapons, were no match for Linwen, who effortlessly handled them, one punch at a time, making it a pleasant afternoon for all. After this casual and friendly encounter, Linwen walked closer to the tent. Hearing the conversation inside, he was amused. Excited, he lifted the tent corner. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Linwen, the leader of the Fog Organization." Observing the dazed Graves on the ground and the cautious Twisted Fate standing by, Linwen found it amusing. After searching for champions in Shurima for so long, he had only made 2 acquaintances. However, here in Zaun, he managed to find 2 in less than an afternoon. Linwen from the Fog Organization. Twisted Fate looked at Linwen warily, his eagle-like eyes gleaming. Then he asked, "What business do you have with us?" "Damn it, Twisted, what the hell are you saying to him? Just kill this bastard." Now fully awake, Graves grabbed his double-barreled cannon, swiftly stood up, and, gritting his teeth, fired a shot at Linwen. Boom! 2 huge shotgun shells shot out from Graves' gun, trailing a string of sparks. While this might not be considered a great weapon in Piltover or Zaun, for Graves, for someone from Bilgewater, it was already a decent piece. However, what happened next left Graves' jaw dropped. Twisted Fate, by his side, remained silent, observing. They witnessed Linwen merely raising his hand, and the 2 shotgun blasts hit a green barrier. Clang! The bullets dropped to the ground. What the hell is this? Graves turned his shocked gaze, completely different from what he had envisioned. In the past, when Graves shot someone with his cannon, it usually resulted in a bloody mess, with entrails spilling out. In the past, the sight of someone clutching their spilled intestines and pleading for mercy was a common occurrence when Graves unleashed his firepower. However, facing Linwen, things were different. "Twisted, this guy and you." Graves couldn't finish his sentence before Twisted Fate loudly interrupted him, "Shut up, you idiot. Hey, why are you yelling at me? You should yell at him." "Why are you yelling at me?" Graves grumbled. Ignoring him, Twisted Fate looked at Linwen, adjusted his hat, and said softly, "Sir, I believe there might be a misunderstanding between us. It was just a small joke we played on the Fog Organization, my brother and I. But what I heard from outside doesn't match what you're saying now. Sir, people tend to exaggerate when bragging, don't they? Issues have solutions, but we should find the easiest one." Seeing that dealing with Linwen wouldn't be easy, especially considering the possibility of formidable magic, Twisted Fate quickly changed his tone, "We're willing to gain your trust with gold. It's better to avoid unnecessary trouble, don't you think?" "You make sense," Linwen nodded. Twisted Fate immediately felt relieved. Avoiding unnecessary trouble was his life motto. If he had known that the leader of the Fog Organization was a magic user, he wouldn't have tangled with the Fog Organization in the first place. After all, they were just thieves and gamblers, not desperate outlaws engaging in robberies and killings. The gang was temporarily formed, and Twisted Fate's original plan was to pull off this job with Graves and then head to Nakos. These stolen goods would surely fetch a good price there. But now, that plan seemed unattainable. The head honcho had come knocking. "But after seeing you guys, I've changed my mind," Linwen said, spreading his hands. It would be a joke to let these 2 get away, Linwen realized immediately after his initial excitement. It made sense to encounter Twisted Fate and Graves in Shurima. Twisted Fate was a Shuriman, a river nomad along the coastal border. As for Graves? It was a saying if you saw Twisted Fate, you were bound to see Graves. These 2 were truly a case of love and hate. Judging by the timing, Linwen guessed they were planning to leave Shurima. After all, they were about to get involved with Gangplank, the Pirate King, and become the ones hunted. "Well, you still need to tell me the reason," Twisted Fate squinted at Linwen, saying, "If the reason is good enough, I might consider your conditions with my brother. I don't want to fight you, you seem strong." "Twisted, are you serious?" Graves scoffed. Linwen put on a serious face, took a step forward, and Twisted Fate quickly stepped back. He cautiously observed Linwen, saying, "Sir, let's talk. It's not good to resort to violence directly. Although you're strong, my brother and I aren't pushovers. Let's fight. Twisted Fate, let's get him," Graves shouted, gripping his gun. All right, gentlemen, calm down." Linwen extended his hands towards Twisted Fate and Graves, gently lifting them into the air with a soft wind. "I'm different from anyone you've encountered before," Linwen calmly stated. "So, in front of me, you can stop with the tricks you're trying to play." His fingers moved, and Twisted Fate's hand, previously hidden behind his back, was slowly revealed. With a shocked expression he looked at Linwen, who was approaching with a curious look. Twisted Fate's temples were sweaty, and he grew nervous. However, when he saw Linwen removing the golden card from his hand, Twisted Fate immediately deflated. He weakly shook his head at Graves beside him, and Graves, who had been loudly clamoring earlier, suddenly fell silent. Observing this scene, Linwen shrugged in silence. These two guys, they were just putting on an act for him earlier. Speaking of which, how did Twisted Fate manage it? Using a single card to teleport himself and others. It was a powerful form of magic. At least, teleportation magic couldn't be weak, and Twisted Fate, this dude, Linwen squinted at him, he had a faint tricolor light on his body, the color of his magic. It was really weak, extremely weak. Weak to the point of not even having 1/5 of Linwen's strength. Yet, a guy with such weak magic possessed teleportation magic? That's not logical. Alright, now it's time to talk. Linwen waved his hand, and Twisted Fate and Graves landed on the ground. Twisted Fate raised his head in frustration, looking at Linwen standing in front of him. His throat rolled as he muttered, "How did you know?" Linwen, with a smirk, blinked at him and said, "Why don't you guess?" Chapter 67. It feels familiar. Symbolically tying Twisted Fate and Graves together with a rope, Linwen brought the two guys back to Zevi. Seeing Linwen resolving the situation and even bringing the people back within just an hour, Zevi and the group of Zaunites were not surprised at all. In their eyes, it was perfectly normal for Linwen to achieve such things. After all, he was a monster. We meet again. Inside the tent, Graves and Twisted Fate were bound back to back on the ground. Not far away, Zevi sat on a stool, casually enjoying afternoon tea and snacks. She waved to Graves with a playful demeanor. "Humph." Graves responded with a cold snort, turning his head away, refusing to look at Zevi. "Hello, ma'am. I'm truly delighted to see you again." Twisted Fate, on the other hand, grinned while sitting on the ground, turning his head to greet Zevi. "Are you really that delighted?" "Yes, it's indeed a pleasure to meet such a beautiful lady like you." "Naturally, it makes people happy," Twisted Fate nodded vigorously. Zevi set down her cake, asking Twisted Fate seriously, "How happy are you?" Twisted Fate fell silent, caught off guard by the question. On the side, Graves started shouting, "You woman, I advise you to release me quickly. Otherwise, when I escape, I'll make sure to blow your damn guts out." "Do you think you can actually escape?" Zevi looked at Graves strangely. "Go ahead, give him a smack." Zevi casually commanded with just a sentence. Behind her, a Zaunite, larger than Graves by a full circle, walked up. Smack! A heavy slap landed on Graves' face. He snorted through his nose and returned to stand behind Zevi, glaring fiercely at Graves. Meanwhile, Zevi remained seated, calmly savoring her afternoon tea. After years of mingling with the Zaunites that Linwen brought along, Zevi naturally picked up some bad habits. As the second-in-command in the organization, she had managed some of Zaun's most ruthless gangsters under her command, either Silco's or Vander's henchmen, each powerful in their own right. Therefore, Zevi was utterly dismissive of Graves' threats. Trying to intimidate her? Damn it! If you have the guts, release me and let me have a go at him. You dare to hit my face? Release me, and I'll show you what a real fist feels like. Graves' face instantly swelled up, shaking his head as he roared. Twisted Fate remained silent on the side. "All right, Graves, stop making a fuss," Linwen intervened. "I told you, your tricks with Twisted Fate won't work on me. It's not difficult to guess what Graves is trying to do. He's just trying to attract attention, hoping to give Twisted Fate time to use magic." But how could Linwen not know? Linwen told Zevi, the one wearing the hat is Twisted Fate. Pay special attention to him. Make sure to have someone put shackles on him later, so he doesn't use magic to escape. Zevi was puzzled, immediately turning to look at Twisted Fate. She then asked Linwen, "You mean he can use magic?" "Yes." "Impressive, magic," Zevi said, suddenly interested in Twisted Fate. She walked a few steps to him, squatting down to look him in the eye, and asked, "What kind of magic do you know, Mr. Mage?" "I can't perform for you right now, beautiful lady." Twisted Fate replied helplessly. "Unless you're willing to release me first. My partner is still in your hands, don't worry, I won't run away." Zevi didn't immediately agree to Twisted Fate's request. Instead, she turned to Linwen, and upon seeing him shake his head, saying, "You mustn't listen to him. If you release him, he'll vanish immediately." Graves snorted. But what he didn't notice was that Twisted Fate lowered his head, his eyes showing a hint of helplessness. Seeing Graves fuming, Linwen thought this guy was truly foolish. Did he really think Twisted Fate would stay for him? If Linwen hadn't detected it early and used wind magic to keep Twisted Fate in check, he might have already escaped. Graves was just wishful thinking. Speaking of their background story, why was Graves chasing Twisted Fate? Wasn't it because Twisted Fate betrayed his teammate? Linwen remembered that very clearly from Graves' background story. Twisted Fate had indeed betrayed Graves once and even sent him to prison. Selling Graves wasn't an impossible thing, it was a definite event. So Linwen wouldn't take that risk. Although he was preventing Twisted Fate from using magic by being present, he had other matters to attend to. Therefore, he left Twisted Fate under Zevi's supervision. To avoid any chance of Twisted Fate escaping, Linwen naturally had to make Zevi more vigilant. But Linwen wasn't particularly concerned about the combat abilities of Twisted Fate and Graves. He cared about the attributes they could bring to him. Getting cards was a challenging task, considering the difficulty of increasing favorability. However, Linwen already had experience in activating champions. Activating champions wasn't too challenging, as long as you matched preferences and developed some relationship, it was achievable. And Twisted Fate and Graves should be 3-star cards, which, once activated, could add a whopping 40 attribute points to Linwen. Remember, crossing the threshold of 500 in a single attribute brought significant improvements to Linwen. Therefore, Linwen needed to figure out a way to get these two on his ship. Linwen didn't fantasize about the combat abilities of Twisted Fate and Graves. Twisted Fate might know magic, given that many people on the land of Runeterra were capable magic users. However, what about Graves? In essence, he was just a street thug. Letting Vander's henchmen loose, Graves would be no match at all. In the game, he might be impressive, but in reality, did he think he could still be impressive? Nonsense. Absolutely nonsense. Zevi quickly left, she had plenty of things to attend to and wasn't as free as these two. In the tent, only a few people remained. Linwen, wrapped in a small woolen blanket, was preparing to take a short nap. After a while, Twisted Fate suddenly looked up and asked Linwen, who was closing his eyes, "How did you figure out that I can use magic?" He was genuinely curious. Only Graves should be aware of this fact, but Linwen seemed to be cautious about him using magic from the very beginning. This obviously didn't make sense. "How did you know I can use magic?" Twisted Fate had realized by now that the other party didn't intend to take his and Graves' lives. So why not engage in a conversation? After all, he was quite confident in his eloquence. The man, however, didn't even open his eyes. Still, the good news was that he answered the question. "I could tell." "Tell?" "Sir, I believe I haven't used magic in front of you." Twisted Fate stared at Linwen on the reclining chair, asking again. "Just like I said, I'm different from the people you've met. I'm very strong." When Linwen said this, Twisted Fate opened his mouth to make a sarcastic remark, but in the end, he couldn't say anything. Linwen's tone was very calm, as if stating a simple fact or something that was only natural to him. He was very strong, that was just a matter of fact. Twisted Fate, dot. "So I can see the magical power in you," Linwen replied without opening his eyes. He wasn't exaggerating because he genuinely saw it. After surpassing the intelligence threshold of 500, Linwen's eyes could perceive things that normal people couldn't. Now, he could see colors around people, representing different natural magical energies. Twisted Fate had 3 faint lights, noble gold, dazzling blue, and dark red. These colors hinted at the potential to control 3 different natural elements. However, it was evident that he was currently too weak to manipulate these elements. The visible difference between him and Linwen was that while Linwen could summon wind with a simple gesture, Twisted Fate required a medium. The cards he used were magical props nurtured with his magical power. They amplified his abilities and facilitated the release of unique spells. Twisted Fate crafted these cards himself, otherwise, why would there be so many magical items for him to consume? Most mages on Runeterra engaged in similar practices, especially those dealing with arcane magic. This type of magic required a medium, like stones infused with energy or ancient relics. Arcane magic seemed to have little connection with the natural elements on Runeterra. Linwen speculated that it might be related to the runic power of the continent. The strength might not always be overwhelming, but it undoubtedly carried a sense of mystery. Rise was a primary example, but unlike him, Rise didn't need a medium. Rise, having been accompanied by runes for years, now embodied the most significant medium himself. He could effortlessly unleash large-scale teleportation magic like Arcane Shift, with a mere lift of his hand, traversing to the other side of the world. It wasn't surprising, given that he was a top figure in this world, an ancient mage who had lived for 1,000 years, exuding a certain level of sophistication. Linwen, too, could cast spells without incantation and without requiring a medium, not because he caught up with Rise but because of the source of his powers, a certain beautiful wind lady. Now, Linwen understood the role of intelligence. Previously considered the most negligible attribute, intelligence had become a valuable tool for Linwen to discern powerful beings. Yet, for someone familiar with the background story like Linwen, its impact wasn't as significant. Another aspect of intelligence was its ability to enhance communication with elements, increase the speed of spellcasting, and expedite the condensation and recovery of magical power. In summary, the 3 attributes strength, agility, and intelligence were all crucial. Linwen engaged in casual conversation with Twisted Fate, who soon found himself silenced by Linwen's words. After a brief silence, the sound of snores emanated from Twisted Fate's side. That wasn't Linwen's snore, it was Graves'. He had already fallen asleep. Twisted Fate sighed and spoke, "I still can't understand." "It's okay, you'll understand in time. When do you plan to let us go? Why don't you guess?" Twisted Fate. It feels familiar. Chapter 68 Prisoners. In the evening, after a short nap, Linwen got up feeling quite comfortable. Sleeping soundly was a luxury he hadn't experienced for a long time, especially in the treacherous sands of Shurima. Trying to sleep in the desert? Ridiculous. If you did that, you might end up buried too deep the next day. The nights in Shurima were terrifying, with the yellow sand devouring everything and bringing countless dangerous creatures along with it. Calling them small creatures? Well, any creature that managed to survive in Shurima until now was probably not harmless. Without the assistance of the giant creature Skalashi, nobody dared to sleep in the desert of Shurima. Linwen had tried using wind magic to envelop himself and sleep in the air, but the higher he flew, the less obedient the elemental spirits were. Those small things had their own thoughts and preferences, reluctant to follow along. After a night of flying, Linwen felt extremely drained. The next day, his lips were purple, and his legs shivered uncontrollably, resembling someone who had overexerted. Flying too low, on the other hand, maintained magical energy, but occasional instability in control during dreams and the frequent intrusion of yellow sand, often resulting in spitting it out sand in the middle of the night, became a norm. After a night of good sleep, Linwen was feeling physically and mentally rejuvenated. It seemed like everyone was in a good mood. Linwen, upon waking, found both Twisted Fate and Graves asleep. Amused, he walked over, playfully extended his leg, and gave Graves a light kick. As expected, Graves groggily opened his eyes, and upon realizing it was Linwen who kicked him, he immediately started cursing. "Damn it, let me go. Otherwise, I'll..." Linwen interrupted Graves before he could continue and smiled, "Are you awake? Did you sleep well?" "Ugh, yeah, not too well." Graves, a bit puzzled, scratched his head, showing a goofy expression. He quickly responded to Linwen's question, but then anger returned to his face. However, before Graves could unleash another round of curses, Linwen spoke up. "It seems to be around mealtime, Graves. Are you hungry?" To everyone's surprise, Graves hesitated for a moment, licked his lips, and exclaimed, "Well, if you're offering food, I'm not saying no." Twisted Fate, witnessing this exchange, facepalmed in disbelief at Graves' behavior. However, he couldn't cover his face because his hands were restrained by a peculiar set of handcuffs, a Zaunite technological innovation rumored to be created by Powder for Six. These cuffs were designed to make it easy for Six to apprehend suspects, though she rarely used them. According to Linwen, Six's reputation in Zaun suffered because she tended to verbally give a short warning before resorting to physical force. Handcuffs for someone who's already half-dragged seemed unnecessary. In recent years, Zaun has seen some improvements, but certain individuals still struggle to shake off their thieving habits, and among them, none is feared more than Six. While other enforcers issue warnings before apprehending suspects, Six takes a more direct approach: punch first, ask questions later, sometimes simultaneously. Linwen, satisfied with this piece of information, acknowledged the close relationship between Six and Powder, given that Powder crafted a special Hextech weapon for her. Linwen mused on how his presence had indeed altered the dynamics. However, Six's penchant for violence seemed unchangeable, much like Linwen's own violent tendencies when he was in his teens. It appeared that this brother had influenced his sister. Despite Six's aggressive nature, no one dared openly criticize her anymore. This was partly due to Six's exceptional combat skills, especially after donning the Hextech weapon made by Powder. Rumors circulated that even Vander, with a weapon, might not necessarily defeat Six in a one-on-one duel. Linwen always knew Six was a natural-born warrior. Another reason for the lack of dissent was Vander's elevated status. As the current ruler of Zaun, Vander's authority was indisputable, and no one in Zaun dared to oppose him. Vander, despite being aware that Six sometimes errs, is extremely fond of his two daughters. His initial motivation for becoming the person he is today was to protect Six. If Six makes a mistake, as long as it's not a major issue, Vander tends to turn a blind eye, especially when it comes to her use of force, which he doesn't consider a mistake. One should never try to provoke a father that have daughters, especially one willing to risk his life for their safety. Mark, go and bring in more food, Linwen, feeling a bit hungry, instructed his attendant. Seeing the ravenous look on Graves' face, Linwen arranged for some food to be brought in. After Mark, a relatively short and seemingly dangerous middle-aged man, entered with a large tray of food, Graves began voraciously salivating. Graves complimented Linwen, saying, "You're not a bad guy. I like the fact that you don't mistreat prisoners." Linwen. And while Mark fed Graves and Twisted Fate, Linwen enjoyed his own meal. After finishing dinner, Graves, satisfied and no longer causing a ruckus, understood that he wouldn't be killed. Accepting the offered food, he jokingly mentioned, "If you could let me play a game of cards and throw in a glass of Shurima wine, I might like you even more." Linwen sighed, "As you said, Graves, you are a prisoner, so please don't make such unreasonable demands." He gestured for Mark to leave. Mark nodded silently and exited the room. "His demands are indeed unreasonable, but my request shouldn't be too much. As you're probably aware, Belzun experiences a drastic drop in temperature at night, and it gets very cold. So, if it's not too much trouble, Linwen, could you please provide blankets for Graves and me?" Twisted Fate made a request. "No problem at all," Linwen nodded. Linwen had already anticipated this issue, having experienced the chilling nights in the desert before. Belzun, just as Twisted Fate described, was scorching hot during the day but got unbearably cold at night. The drastic temperature difference between day and night might be related to physics or something about the heat capacity of sand, but Linwen found it more practical to accept this as common knowledge rather than delving too deeply into the science. Twisted Fate, relieved at Linwen's agreement, thanked him, recognizing that despite his magical abilities, his physical resilience was not strong. During the day, both Twisted Fate and Graves didn't wear thick clothing due to the intense heat. Graves wore a grey tank top, while Twisted Fate wore a robe for shade, but it offered little warmth. Consequently, after a night in the cold, Graves might be uncomfortable, but Twisted Fate feared he might end up freezing his brain. Linwen quickly fetched 2 thick blankets and personally wrapped them around Twisted Fate and Graves. "Wait, Linwen, I think both of us might need to use the restroom first," Graves suddenly interjected. Chapter 69 8th Sundara. Twisted Fate once again presented a condition to Linwen. After all, it wouldn't be appropriate for him and Graves to handle the deed in the same place, right? Linwen thought about it and agreed, arranging for them to use the restroom. Upon their return, Linwen, in his usual manner, tightly wrapped the 2 guys who now looked like bacon. Reflecting on this scene, Linwen couldn't help but feel incredibly generous. "I'm truly kind-hearted. I've experienced being frozen, so I don't want others to suffer the same fate. I'm indeed a great person. However, a retort quickly followed. Linwen, it's not that cold right now, actually, I think. Why are you so annoying? Linwen hadn't grown impatient with Twisted Fate yet, but Graves, standing nearby, was already irritated. He interrupted Twisted Fate and delivered a headbutt to emphasize his point, loudly saying, "This guy has been more than generous. If we were back in my hometown, prisoners making conditions? Ridiculous. Shoot 'em dead, toss 'em into the sea for the fishes. Those who enjoy torturing prisoners would hang 'em up to dry for the sea eagles. I even shot at him this afternoon, and he's not killing me now. You should be thanking your lucky stars," he added, scolding Twisted Fate, "you better cut it out. How shameless can you be? Twisted Fate. Why should I be thankful for him not killing you?" Considering Graves' straightforward mindset, Twisted Fate was accustomed to it. He politely nodded at Linwen, offering an apologetic smile. As for Linwen, he couldn't help but marvel at Graves' thought process. This guy's brain works in mysterious ways. Somehow, his favorability has increased. Is Graves the one of those character who self-clear? 8th Sundara? In reality, Graves should be thinking along these lines. I wanted to kill him. He caught me, but he's not killing me. He's treating me well. He even feeds his prisoners and agrees to their conditions. What a nice guy. Twisted Fate was so annoying, but Linwen still patiently listened to him. What a great guy. Linwen wondered if Graves was currently thinking about these things. He really might be thinking this way. In the lore, Graves was a ruthless but reckless individual. He killed many but never gives you that intimidating vibe. He's also known for doing foolish things, often on the dumber side. Anyway, Linwen, I'll say good night in advance. Seeing Linwen about to leave, Twisted Fate hastily spoke. He was trying to build rapport, not wanting to get beaten. Thanks, I hope you have a good night too. Linwen replied and left the tent, leaving Twisted Fate looking helpless. A good night? How could it possibly be a good night? Stuck here tied up with Graves, the stench radiating from him was unbearable. He couldn't move and was forced to endure it. It stinks. It stinks to death. Have a good night? Twisted Fate laughed helplessly, a desolate smile on his face, haha. Twisted Fate, what are you laughing about? Graves immediately asked. In the tent now, it was just Graves and Twisted Fate, back to back. Even if Twisted Fate laughed quietly, Graves could still hear it. Graves seemed quite relaxed now. He didn't react dramatically to being captured. After all, Graves had grown up in the gangs around the docks, became a mercenary at a young age, so he was used to being captured and locked up. This time, the treatment was surprisingly good. Fed when hungry, covered with blankets when cold, and assisted when needing to relieve himself. Twisted Fate sarcastically commented, "Why would you care? We're brothers. Your business is my business. How could I not care about you?" Twisted Fate sighed deeply. Silence. Quiet. Gradually, Twisted Fate felt the atmosphere becoming somewhat awkward. However, before he could personally experience this awkwardness, a voice sounded behind him. Graves, looking serious, said loudly, "In my opinion, that kid clearly wants to recruit us both. But I think it's not a bad thing. Twisted, our goal is to make money. Can't we make money working with him? That kid seems strong, has a big heart, and a bunch of followers. Making money with him should be quite profitable. A guy like him, I've only seen one in my entire life." "I know, it's Plank, right?" Twisted Fate preempted Graves, interrupting him. "So, are you saying you want to follow him and have no plans to return to see the king of Bilgewater?" "Haha, I'm just a small fry, can't really meet him," Graves awkwardly replied. "I was just bragging with you earlier, don't take it seriously." "You're unbelievable," Twisted Fate sighed. "Anyway, I appreciate that kid. If he's willing to hire me, I don't mind working for him," Graves said. "I've been doing this all my life. Whoever pays me, I'll do the job." Twisted Fate remained silent. He didn't want to take orders. He preferred to be a carefree gambler, traveling across the continent. "What's your take on this?" Graves asked. Twisted Fate didn't answer, he didn't feel like talking. But Graves kept asking. That was how they were. Twisted Fate always looked down on Graves' intelligence, but Graves had gotten used to it. Unable to endure Graves' constant chatter, Twisted Fate finally said, "Enough, Graves, that's enough. Just zip it already. You need to tell me what you think, Twisted. Ask about that kid's background. If he's not from Nakas, we could join him. He's definitely not from Nakas. How do you know?" "I just know." "Enough, stop asking me." "Oh." Silence returned to the tent. But soon, someone broke the tranquility again. I think I didn't pee enough just now. Damn, Twisted, I feel like I need to pee again. You motherfoo." At the same time, in another separate tent, Linwen took out the Hextech phone from his chrono ring. He scratched his head, finding numerous missed calls, some from Silco, some from Clagger, Milo, and even Echo. But the most calls were from 1 and 2, especially 1, with over 40 missed calls. Linwen frowned, picked up the Hextech phone, pressed a button, and all the missed call notifications disappeared. "Ah," Linwen sighed. "I'm done for." The calls from number 1, well, that's Powder's number. Chapter 70 Sisters. In the town center of Belzuan, atop a massive iron tower bathed in blue lightning, on the other side of the sea, in Zaun. In the middle layers of Zaun, at 5:30 in the afternoon, the typical time for most Zaunites to finish work. In a residential area of the middle layers, there was a sturdy and welcoming apartment building. Six, who had just finished her shift being the enforcer of Zaun, wasted no time. Her first action was to hop on her Hextech hoverboard and head back to her apartment. With advancements in Hextech technology, life for the people of Zaun had become more convenient. Six only needed less than 10 minutes to effortlessly travel from the Undercity to her home in the middle layers, a journey that used to take half an hour with the elevators. Her urgency to return home was due to the confirmed information from Vander, that guy Linwen, we finally got news from him. He was going to call her. Six was thrilled, even entertaining the thought of leaving work early, but her strong work ethic prevailed. As soon as she finished work, she swiftly rode her Hextech hoverboard to the middle layers of Zaun, returning to her cozy home. Six no longer resided at the Undercity Tavern, as it had been reconstructed into Zaun's political center, the Parliament. She had moved into the apartment provided by the Zaun enforcers. Standing at the door, Six quickly inserted the key, turned it, and pushed open the iron gate, striding into her warm little abode. Inside, a scene of contrast awaited her, a giant pink sandbag suspended in the air and various fitness equipment scattered in one corner, a collection of massive iron blocks and specially crafted Hextech gem resistance devices, all for Six's physical training. On the other side, adorable plush toys and cute trinkets adorned the space. Such as many cute cups, adorable animal-themed tableware and plates, and an oversized radio. On top of it, there were cute animal plush toys and a green artificial plant. These obviously weren't Six's belongings because they didn't match her style. Six was a neat and straightforward girl, not particularly fond of cute things. So, whose could they be? "Oh, you're finally back." From behind the hanging sandbag, a pair of slender legs extended. Despite their attractiveness, they seemed a bit thin and delicate, with a fair and slender appearance. Swiftly moving flexible toes, the owner of the feet gradually emerged from behind the sandbag. She sat on it, holding onto the suspension ropes, gazing at Six with a pair of captivating gem-like blue eyes. With a nimble leap, she transformed her legs into a hanging position from the ceiling, then swung down in front of Six. Two long blue braids touched the ground, and a lovely face appeared before Six's eyes. The touch of childishness still lingered, but it was evident that she was a potential beauty. Six wordlessly pushed away the face, ignoring her discontent. She proceeded to take off her uniform. Six hung the enforcement jacket on a nearby rack, and there was another jacket on top of it, an instructor's coat from the Zaun Academy. Honestly, no one could have imagined that a professor's coat would belong to someone like her. Having done with these tasks, Six sighed heavily, turned around, and looked at the hanging girl, saying, "Powder, can you put on pants before talking?" "Why? This is my own home. What's there to be afraid of? No one can see me. I just hope you can be a bit more considerate." Six, in a shirt, passed by Powder with an amused smile, heading towards the kitchen. She opened the topmost cabinet, took out a cup Powder had bought for her, an adorable pink cup with a blue monkey doodle hand drawn by Powder. Then, Six opened the bottom freezer and took out a ice ball. Pouring herself a glass of fine wine, she leaned against the wall, raised her hand, and sipped the wine from the glass. This was the joyous time for adults. After a day's work, having a drink or two was quite a luxury. Six's current life was something she wouldn't have dared to dream about before. Taking another sip of wine, Six looked at Powder and said, "Sometimes, Milo and Clagger might come to find me. Do you want them to see you like this? See a butt-naked Powder? I am wearing shorts, you dummy. I've grown up, Six. And there's nothing attractive about me. Unlike you, with your big butt." Powder made a face at Six, then jumped down from the ceiling. Once Powder landed and steadied herself, Six saw that she was indeed wearing shorts, very short shorts. It seemed acceptable to dress like that at home. Running up to Six in a few quick steps, Powder snatched Six's cup and took a sip in front of her. After drinking just a bit, she stuck out her tongue. Ugh! Powder held the cup, tongue out, looking dazed. "It tastes awful. Why don't you pour yourself a glass of juice? You don't even like alcohol. Every day you come home and enjoy a glass of wine like this, I just want to know what's so good about it. Then you don't have to snatch my drink every day." "Well, you're my sister, so I have the right to snatch yours." Handing the cup back to Six, Powder turned around, hands behind her back, tiptoed like a robot, and walked step by step toward the circular indented sofa. Powder pounced onto the soft sofa, wriggling her way into the softness. She turned around, legs crossed, looking up at Six in the distance. Then, she spoke, "Oh, by the way, Six, did Linwen call you?" "Yeah, he called twice." Six promptly replied. "Haha, I win. He called me 3 times. Six. Always claiming to be grown up, but isn't she just a kid?" Powder, the jealous little sister. But why did Six's teeth feel itchy? "Ah, maybe I've been eating too many sweets lately. Did I get a cavity? No, that can't be it. I don't really like sweets." Six looked at Powder, gnawing her teeth. When Six moved here, Powder naturally followed her. Of course, she had to live with her big sister. And now, the bed in the room, which was only 1.2 meters wide and 1.8 meters long, was the sleeping place for the two sisters. The bed was all pink, with a pink mattress, pink sheets and a pink quilt. Powder sunk into the sofa, shaking her Hextech phone in her hands. It was blue, modified many times by Zevi, but it retained its original design, matching Powder's blue hair. Now, she looked at the Hextech phone nervously and said, "Do you think he'll call you first, or me?" "Pfft, who cares about that kind of thing?" "Oh." Powder squinted her eyes, tilted her head back, and made a weird noise. "Miss Violet says she doesn't care about you, Mr. Laurent." "Clearly, I didn't even mention who the call was from." "Six, you. Seriously? Wow, is Miss Violence going to start domestic violence on me?" Powder looked pitifully at Six, neck shrinking. "You're out there punching criminals every day. I knew this day would come. Professor Singed said that people who engage in violent events for a long time will slowly become violent, and this violence will eventually be used on close ones because it's an illness. All right, come hit me then." Powder spread her hands. "I'm your little sister after all." Six emptied her cup, then placed it heavily in the sink. Stepping towards Powder with an intimidating look. As Six approached, Powder, the latter still pretending to be pitiful, gazed at her. Honestly, her little sister had talent in acting. This expression, so full of grievances, with innocent and pitiful little eyes, tempting pursed red lips that seemed like they would cry in the next second. But Six wasn't falling for it. She reached out and firmly grabbed Powder's face, pulling on both sides with force. "Ow! Ow! 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 Big sis, I'm sorry." When Six let go, Powder's face was already red. "I'm going to tell Vander." "Tell him? How are you going to tell him? Cry to Dad that your sister hit you. Then I'll call the police. You're abusing me, and I'll have the police come and arrest you." Powder said angrily. Six smirked, raised her chest, and looked down at Powder. "Badge 009, Violet, enforcer from the Undercity, here to serve you, ma'am. Can you please tell me what kind of trouble you're facing?" Powder blinked after hearing that. "Oh right, my sister is a cop." Chapter 71 Fighting for the phone. After playing around with Powder for a while, Six had to prepare for work. Every evening after work, she had to write a report on the day's activities and submit it to her immediate superior the next morning. Well, that was someone Six particularly disliked. Sevika, that woman. Why was she the chief while Six was just an officer? Silco suggested making Sevika the chief. Ha, no problem, Six could take it as Silco targeting her. She couldn't stand that bird person anyway. But the problem was, Vander actually agreed? Vander agreed with Silco. He let Sevika become the sheriff of Zaun. This was clearly wrong. Six's current strength was much greater than Sevika's. She was the renowned fist of Zaun. Vander really lacked foresight. With this resentment, Six grabbed a chair, sat under the desk lamp, and reluctantly started writing the day's report. One of the things Six hated the most was writing reports. Writing this stupid thing was more troublesome than catching criminals. Six would rather be outside fighting those dangerous criminals than sitting here writing diary like a normal girl. Ha! But there was no way around it. It was part of the job, after all. Six bit the end of her pen, started organizing her thoughts, and a few minutes later, she began writing. August 24th, Badge No 009. This morning, I collaborated with Officer 014 to apprehend an undercover spy from Piltover in the boundary markets. In the afternoon, I apprehended a thief who was stealing from others in the commercial district of the Undercity. This is just a brief summary. Six still had to write down the details. Six continued writing the report, including details about the spy and the thief, along with crucial information gathered during their interrogation. As Six focused on her work, Powder remained in the sofa, occasionally glancing at Six's hextech phone. It seemed like she was waiting for something. After waiting for what felt like an entire afternoon, Powder couldn't contain her frustration. She raised her hextech phone high, expressing her impatience. It's been almost the whole afternoon. It's been 3 hours, and he still hasn't called? One must keep one's word, he can't lie, that's what he taught me. However, Powder noticed Six's distracted gaze. Idiot, if you can't continue writing, just don't. What are you afraid of? Sevika won't really punish you. She's only good at threatening us verbally. She never dared to actually do anything to us, especially now that we're all grown up. Noticing that Powder has caught on to her distracted state, Six quickly explains, it's not because I'm afraid of Sevika. It's just my responsibility, so even if I can't write, I still have to go and do it. Trying to comfort Six, Powder muttered under her breath, yes, Miss Officer. Another half-hour passed. Six kept writing, and Powder killed time in boredom. In the midst of the warm and quiet atmosphere, a sudden and urgent ringtone broke the peace, causing both Powder and Six to swiftly turn towards the source of the sound. Powder immediately checked her hextech phone. Why didn't he call me first? Jumping up from the sofa, Powder, barefoot, ran towards the hextech phone on the table. However, someone was quicker than her. Six got there first, grabbing the hextech phone before Powder could reach it. With a mischievous smile and a shrug, Six said, "This is my phone. Give it to me." "I won't." "Give it to me. He's calling me." "Then why didn't your phone ring?" "You, Six. You can't do this." "Six. Oh, here I am, Powder." Six effortlessly pushed away the charging Powder. He had taught Powder martial arts, just like Vander had. Six knew what the kids of Zaun needed: strength. Even Silco, who didn't seem like much of a fighter, had taught Powder some brawling techniques. However, those who taught Powder were eventually driven away by Singed. According to Singed, the strength displayed by fists is not true power. One day, Powder would make everyone understand what real power is. This is why Powder appears weak for now. "Why don't you check who's calling first?" Powder tried to jump up, but Six pressed her back down and teasingly said, "Don't fool yourself, Powder. It's Linwen calling." Six kept one hand on Powder's head, the other shaking the hextech phone screen in front of her. "He's such a jerk. I called him dozens of times this afternoon, and now he calls you first." Powder, indignant, complained, "How many times did you call him today?" "Twice," Six mumbled reluctantly. "Dozens of calls, and Linwen still hadn't picked up. Powder must have wasted a lot of energy." Six shook her head, realizing she was thinking too much. After all, Linwen was the father of hextech phones. Such trivial matters didn't need Six's concern. Her brother was now the wealthiest person in Zaun, even considered a tycoon in Piltover. So, in a way, Six and Powder were like small-scale tycoons. Give me the phone, I'll answer it. Powder stomped her foot. This time, Six didn't argue and handed the phone to Powder. Six could tell Powder was genuinely getting angry. Powder's temper was different from hers. She rarely got angry, but when she did, it could be quite terrifying. Who wants to wake up in the middle of the night with strange hextech weapons pointed at them? You've got some sense. Powder grabbed the phone, then glared at Six, saying, otherwise, sis, you might have to walk to the police station tomorrow morning. That hoverboard is something Echo and I worked on together. I just need a few taps to dismantle it. Before Six could respond, Powder pressed the answer button. Then, a voice came from the other side. Six. It's me, your brother Linwen. As the call connected, there was a moment of hesitant male voice, followed by an awkward laugh. The voice continued, why aren't you saying anything? It's you, right? Six. Six and Powder exchanged glances. Six saw the anger that had flared in Powder's eyes earlier now completely dissipate. In her big eyes, all that remained was a sense of grievance and dissatisfaction. As for Six, she unconsciously sniffled. It had been so long since she heard his voice. There were even rumors in Zaun that Linwen was possibly trapped somewhere. Powder had even thought of leading a team to Shurima to find Linwen. Of course, nobody agreed, not Vander, not Silco, and certainly not Six. Six didn't want Powder to venture too far from home. But did Six herself not wish to go out and find Linwen? Hearing Linwen's voice, Six felt the tension in her chest release. Powder felt the same way. In fact, there was no longer any unhappy expression on her face. The situation of receiving 40 calls and him calling Six first might be frustrating, but hearing his voice made everything okay. I'm not Six though. Powder lowered her voice and spoke into the hextech phone. But this is Six's phone, right? I'm Linwen. If you can answer Six's phone, then you should know me. The voice on the other end hastily said, is Six there? Can you pass her the phone? Six? Hat, she's right next to me. Upon hearing this, there was a 3-second pause from the other side. Then, hesitatingly, he said, Powder. Chapter 72. Well, I don't know. Yeah, that's right, it's Powder here. Six, leaning against the wall, chimed in immediately, I'm here too. Linwen recognized Six's voice. It hadn't changed much, after all, when he left, Six was already 17, well past her voice-changing years. Powder's voice, on the other hand, took him a moment. But thinking about it, it made sense. When he left, Powder was around 13 or 14. Now, almost reaching adulthood, some change in her voice was expected. If there were no changes, that would be strange. Six had grown up, but she was still the enforcer of Piltover that Linwen knew. Except for not having a nose ring, no iconic Six tattoo on her face, and no strange tattoos on her body. She was now an enforcer of Zaun. And Six's height seemed not too tall. Linwen initially thought Six would be much taller than Caitlin, but in reality, Six seemed to be around 1.65 meters. As for Powder, what kind of future did she have after not growing up into Jinx? Powder had short hair, very short. Super short. Thinking about this, Linwen chuckled and said, haha. Are you two together now? Linwen asked a somewhat silly question, but well, he was extremely nervous right now. It's strange why hearing Powder's voice on Six's hextech phone gave him a sneaky feeling. Did he do something wrong to Powder? Although Powder called him many times, calling Six first didn't seem like a big offense, right? But thinking carefully, maybe he did something a bit wrong. I'm living with Six now, Powder replied. Living with Six? Are you not staying with Vander anymore? Linwen asked. Six, hearing Linwen's question, explained, Linwen, Powder is almost 18 now, and as for me, well, let's not talk about that. Anyway, how could we still be living with Vander? Besides, Vander is extremely busy now, we can't disturb him. He's a super busy person. Linwen nodded. You're right. When do you plan to come back? Vander said you would return on the next progress day, Six asked, both sisters still holding onto the phone. I'll be back soon, there are many things waiting for me to solve there. At the latest, it should be on progress day, but don't worry, you'll definitely see me that day, Linwen assured. Can't you come back sooner? Powder started to ask but didn't finish the sentence. I'll do my best. As soon as I finish the matter here, I'll come back, Powder, Linwen promised. Of course, he also wanted to return as soon as possible. Linwen's departure from Zaun had many reasons, and a significant one was his relationship with Jace. Staying in Zaun meant exposing Jace to coercion from the upper city's elites, who sought to exploit Hextech phone profits and squeeze Zaun's productivity. Being stuck between his city and his friend, Linwen chose to leave Piltover to spare Jace from the uncomfortable situation. Another reason was Linwen's need to rapidly increase his strength. Dealing with the challenges ahead involved more than just Piltover. The real enemies weren't Piltover but the powerful families at the top. Linwen made it clear to Vander and Silco that Piltover wasn't Zaun's enemy. The real adversaries were the influential families atop Piltover, and some of them were once Zaunites. Facing external threats, especially from Nakus, Linwen knew that Piltover, sandwiched between two powerful nations, needed the ability to protect itself. Nakus cared little for others' opinions, openly expressing its ambitions to dominate the continent. Linwen wanted to return, but the circumstances required him to grow stronger first. The ambitions of powerful nations and the potential threats demanded a more formidable Piltover for survival. In summary, Linwen certainly wants to go back. Over the past 4 years, he has often considered just going back, as life in the desert has been incredibly tough. However, he can't do that. Some things can't be postponed, and waiting until later would truly be too late. Now, he has nearly completed what he set out to do in Shurima. He envisions a future where Shurima will rise again, and on that day, Linwen hopes to exchange a few words with the Emperor. He has dedicated a lot of effort, working over the numerous things he has done, yet no one around him knows the extent of his actions. Sometimes, Linwen contemplates giving up, but when he thinks about Powder, 6, and the people he met in Zaun and Piltover, he grits his teeth and perseveres. He delves into the northern desert of Shurima, flying over the dunes, witnessing the once glorious Ascended Kingdom, and getting close to the seemingly void-tainted coastline. In the desert, he battles with a band of cannibalistic thieves and faces strange unknown creatures in the deep sea. Throughout these years, Linwen has endured injuries, with the most severe incident leaving his lower body completely ravaged. One night in the desert, he literally cried, nearly believing he was turning into another Victor. He has no intention of following in Victor's footsteps in creating prosthetic little brother down there. The good news is that after a few days, the missing parts of Linwen's body grew back. He is truly exhausted. So, once he completes that task, he's heading back to Zaun. Back to his home. When the time comes, no one can stop him. Now, hearing the voices of Six and Powder, Linwen feels considerably relieved. It's 100 times more joyful than seeing Zevi. The conversation among them continues. In the night of Shurima, Linwen sits in his tent, legs crossed, a smile on his face, listening to the voices from the Hextech phone. He laughs and says, "You've actually become the head of weapons department? You're amazing, Powder." "Haha, of course, I have to be more amazing than Six now. I'm a department hest, while Six, oh Linwen, our Lady Violet is now a constable, a cop." "Wait, who do you think you're calling a constable cop?" Six glares at Powder, displeased. On second thought, Powder's position is indeed much higher than hers. "Ah, my bad, I'm wrong. It hurts. Linwen. Six keeps bullying me now. This is my way of expressing love to you, Powder. When I get back, I'll personally teach Six a lesson to vent your frustrations." "Really? Of course, when have I ever lied to you? Back when I was a kid, I believed you. I thought you were my big brother, and I couldn't contradict you. But now, Linwen, think about it. How many times have you lied to me?" "Powder's right, you should tone down that authoritative tone of yours. Both Powder and I have grown up, really grown up." "Pfft, only you have grown big, I haven't, ugh." "No, Powder, what are you looking at?" Six's voice shakes a bit. Linwen rubs his nose. The conversation seems a bit off, hey? But Linwen can deduce something from it. So Powder is really a small Powder, not a big Powder, hey? Linwen doesn't know how to react to this. About nutrition, Powder should be getting enough, right? Linwen remembers that before he left, Powder had a habit of drinking milk every day. But why is she still in flat powder? Linwen chuckles. The call goes on very late. Until 6's hextech phone makes a low battery sound. Linwen, 6, and Powder's conversation is coming to an end. It's already very late, Linwen says. I have to go to work tomorrow, 6 adds. Powder, however, is still a bit unsatisfied. Of course she's not satisfied. She waited too long for this call. She missed him so much. So, Powder says reluctantly, you better remember to call me again. I'll call tomorrow, Linwen promises. It better be mine, not 6's. The blue-haired girl jumps up and down, making a face at her sister, who looks completely indulgent. Linwen nods helplessly, all right, I'll call you. But then, Powder immediately adopts a stern tone, by the way, Linwen, tell me, why did you call 6 first and not me? I've called you dozens of times, haven't you noticed? Linwen falls silent. It's because Powder called so many times that Linwen was hesitant about whether to call her first. With over 40 missed calls, he was afraid Powder would fired up immediately, so he called 6 first. But how does he explain this to Powder? Fortunately, Powder gives him a way out. Forget it. Anyway, next time you must call my hextech phone. In front of 6, Powder grabs the phone, opens her mouth, and quickly said. Okay, I'm hanging up. Bye, see you. Oh, and I really miss you. Bye. After that, Powder immediately hangs up the hextech phone. Facing 6's playful expression, Powder hums and hands the hextech phone to 6, pouting, what's your deal? Why are you looking at me like that? Powder says coyly. I don't know, 6 replies. Go to sleep. I have to make weapons tomorrow. Powder lowers her head, sneaks under 6's arm like a little mouse, and runs into the bathroom. After talking so much, there's a slightly dizzy feeling, like a lack of oxygen. In front of the mirror, Powder touches her own face. But does a person's face really get hot from talking too much? Singed never taught her that. Well, I don't know. Chapter 73 Her. Noxian year 984, late August. After spending a few days in Zaun, Linwen packed his belongings, ready to venture deep into the vast desert of Shurima again. But this time, Linwen's destination wasn't the west of Shurima, instead, he was heading southeast. Regarding this, Zivi expressed her lack of understanding. He spent 2 years in the west and came back alone without bringing anything substantial. Now, shortly after returning, he was heading east. According to the desert dwellers who fled from the east to Zaun, the danger there was much higher. Although Zivi didn't understand, she didn't try to dissuade Linwen. However, this time, Zivi wouldn't wait for Linwen in Zaun. Instead, she would be accompanying a group of Zaunites, bringing 2 captives back to Piltover and Zaun. Yes, Twisted Fate and Graves had agreed to go to Zaun, though the former agreed reluctantly. Before parting, Zivi had a lot to say to Linwen. When I go back this time, they'll know you're coming back too, Zivi said after some thought. Actually, I'm not in such a hurry to go back. It's okay. Everything that needed to be done is done, and we can all leave and go back. Also, Zivi, thank you for your hard work these years. I appreciate your help. Linwen, don't think too much. I came to Shurima not for you but because I've wanted to come here for a long time. This continent hides countless treasures, and no curious inventor can resist coming to see it for themselves. Zivi shrugged and said. She disliked this feeling, she didn't like being the good person. Everything she did was because she felt like doing it. Now, like Jace, is she standing between the people of Piltover and Zaun? No way. Zivi is not Jace Talus. She's not as kind or as naive as he is. From the moment they first met, Zivi told Linwen that her family was outsiders. She used to be, to some extent, a Noxian. The Retta family squeezed into the noble class of Piltover because of her. Still, when it came to being noble, only Zivi knew the real situation. Well, thanks to you, Linwen smiled helplessly, paused for a moment, tightened the cloth bag in his hand, and said to Zivi, but after going back, Zivi, your situation might be very bad. They may very well imprison you. It doesn't matter. Anyway, when you come back, everything will turn a new page. I've actually been fed up with those useless orders for a long time. I don't want to graduate and sell myself to a big family, then be forced to do things I don't like. Piltover is indeed great, but this greatness is not bestowed by councilors and major families, it's the soul and nature of every person in Piltover that make Piltover great. Zevi raised her fist towards Linwen, speaking earnestly, the people of Piltover naturally aspire to science, love invention, and want to pursue all the truths in the world, but the big shots hindered this nature. What you want to do is not attack Piltover, not taking over Piltover, but to take the lives of certain people. I hope what you say is true. Linwen was silent for a moment, nodded, and extended his fist. Thank you. I said, no need to be polite. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for myself. Zevi rolled her eyes dramatically, then she and Linwen bumped fists. Noxian calendar, year 984, mid-September, the 13th day. On the eastern edge of Shurima, in the desolate desert, Linwen is manipulating wind magic, advancing towards his target at a steady pace, always keeping an eye on the surroundings. A gentle wind forms a transparent shield in front of Linwen, blocking the sand from hitting his face. Flying in the air, Linwen sees a patch of green. That place is the Kumungu jungle. He remembered that it was Zyra's territory. Of course, Linwen's destination is not the Kumungu jungle, nor is it the mysterious Ikathia. The place Linwen is heading to is near the Shuriman village close to Ikathia. He is looking for someone. A human monster that is good at communication. Linwen estimates that, with high probability, she is a 5-star card, and up until now, Linwen doesn't have a single 5-star card. After nearly 20 days of travel, Linwen finally arrives at the land corrupted by the void Ikathia. But when thinking more carefully, he should still be in the Shurima region at the moment. The reason he sees the purple desert and strange purple plants swaying like tentacles is that the void corruption has spread from Ikathia to Shurima. So, she should be nearby. Landing on the ground, Linwen restrains his aura. After arriving at this place, it is crucial not to fly in the sky, as the void's influence can set off a chain reaction. Once it senses the presence of living beings, it becomes ferocious, unleashing countless void creatures to devour all life. Linwen, of course, wouldn't allow such a thing. After walking on the ground for 3 days, Linwen finally found a small village on Kalihasa, near Ikathia and along the Kalai River. The villagers were surprised by his arrival since no one had come to their remote place for years. Linwen asked the local elders some questions and was unexpectedly informed that they knew about her. However, her reputation was not good, mentioning her brought expressions of astonishment and fear. Are you looking for someone like a monster? You're putting me in a difficult position. But when Linwen presented a pile of supplies, the elderly desert dweller immediately smiled, revealing missing teeth, and said, if you're talking about monsters, there are plenty on the land of Shurima, ancient gods from legends. We haven't seen them, though. But, Mr. Linwen, what I'm about to tell you is a strange occurrence in the last decade, and many have witnessed it. The old desert dweller had some men move Linwen's belongings before continuing, it's a monster with a purple shell, but it can speak human language. Linwen's eyes lit up. Some say it's an ancient fear from the ruins of Ikathia, a monster transformed from the vengeful spirit of an empire long ago. It's bloodthirsty, killing any creature in its path. A boy from our village saw her in a cave, witnessed her killing a bunch of purple bugs. Fortunately, she didn't notice the boy, and he survived. I think she and those purple monsters are together, all bloodthirsty creatures. They seem to have turned against each other. Linwen interrupted the old desert dweller, puzzled, but if she really kills any living being in front of her, how do you know about her? Anyone who has seen it says the same. The old desert dweller paused, realizing he hadn't thought about this. Indeed, more and more people claimed to have seen it over the years, yet no one died at its hands. What was going on? Oh! The old desert dweller suddenly remembered something, looking at Linwen with seriousness. Sir, I just remembered something. Listen to me. 6 months ago, there was a village called Blackwool here, a prosperous village. But now, it's turned into ruins. The culprit behind this is that monster. I heard from refugees passing by that it killed the kind village chief, burned down everyone's houses, and forced hundreds to flee, homeless. The old desert dweller seemed to want to confirm his words. That's a bloodthirsty monster. But upon hearing this, Linwen sighed in relief. Well, killing the village chief, destroying the village, and driving away the villagers, it all sounded like Kaisa's background story. She entered the void when she was around 10 years old and survived in both worlds for over a decade. So now, she should be roughly the same age as himself? No, not necessarily. After all, Linwen isn't sure when Kaisa fell into the void. But anyway, Linwen is reassured. She and the champion he knows have no difference. Before coming, Linwen was a bit uneasy, a bit anxious. Even though he understands the champion's background stories and has a general idea of what kind of person a champion might be, there's always some uncertainty. At least now, looking at it, the personalities of several champion are not exactly as Linwen imagined. But she is still herself. Chapter 74 Doma and Her. Doma, don't be afraid. There's nothing to fear, Doma. You can get out of here, you can do it. Doma, believe in yourself. You're the child of a hunter, so you can survive. You need to stay calm, Doma, be even calmer, have more composure. Father once said, the more dangerous the situation, the calmer you should be. Stay calm, and you'll find a way out. In the dim and lightless underground, a little girl who was unexpectedly swallowed into this world, now tightly grips a bone-made dagger in her hand, cautiously surveying her surroundings. Her name is Doma, the daughter of a hunter from a nearby village. Right now, 11-year-old Doma looks up, but she can't see the sky. It's as if she has entered another world. Doma doesn't know how she ended up in this place, she has no idea what happened. She only remembers wanting to catch grass lizards in a small oasis. But her vision dimmed, and when she woke up again, Doma found herself here. Now, with courage in her heart, Doma places the bone-made dagger in front of her and carefully feels the damp wall with her other hand, walking along the cave's wall. Father said, in a cave, to find an exit, you have to use your ear, use your nose to sense. I can do it. My nose is good. Doma takes a deep sniff, sensing the smell, and then, with self-spoken excitement, she says, this is the smell of wind. The exit is right there. Feeling that she has found the direction, Doma puts in extra effort, propelling herself forward with her two short legs. She is truly brave, so brave that she, in a situation she knows nothing about, has been walking alone in this environment for 3 hours. It wasn't until 3 hours passed that Doma felt disheartened, and the thought of giving up crossed her mind. Her stomach growled audibly, Doma was hungry. She wanted to find something to eat, but it was evident that there was nothing edible nearby. This was a strange world, a lightless, damp underworld. Will I die? Leaning against the wall, Doma, after stopping, realized she was both hungry and cold. Then, a strange sound echoed. Thud, thud. Doma quickly stood up, alertly looking ahead. During this time, no matter how she spoke or made noise, there was no response, but now there was an odd commotion. Nervously watching the source of the sound, something slowly rolled in. Gulp. It was the sound of swallowing saliva. In front of Doma, a plump fruit rolled out. It was a honeydew melon, about the size of Doma's head, a precious fruit that she could only eat on special occasions. And now, a whole melon lay before her. Who are you? But Doma wasn't overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of food, instead, she cautiously asked. There was no sound from the front, instead, another fruit appeared. It was a sand fruit, and Doma recognized it. Are you giving these to me to eat? Doma put down her guard and asked softly. A voice came from over there. MMM. Very light, somewhat hoarse, but a gentle voice. Thank you. Doma quickly ran over to pick up the honeydew melon and sand fruit. Then she ran back to her original spot, opened her mouth, and took a hearty bite. However, her eyes remained fixed on the front. She still hadn't let her guard down, even though she felt the other person meant no harm. But that's the instinct of a hunter. She is the daughter of a hunter. After you finish eating, follow me. I'll take you out. The person said again. Doma became alert. She took another bite of honeydew melon, joy appearing in her tired eyes. However, she said, but you haven't told me who you are. If you don't say, I can't follow you. You're very dangerous. The person was silent for a moment, then spoke with a tone that seemed to contain some admiration for Doma, saying softly, but you have no other choice, do you? Sometimes, following the strong is the instinct of the weak. Doma listened in silence, but soon, she pursed her lips, nodded, and said, You're right. I have no other choice. I have to thank you first. If it weren't for you, I might have given up. No need, the person said again. Doma felt that the other person seemed quite indifferent. But can an indifferent person extend a helping hand to a helpless little girl? Doma didn't know. But she spoke up, saying, "By the way, my name is Doma. What's your name?" "You don't need to know my name." Doma was very obedient. She was a strong and obedient girl. Knowing it wasn't the time to be stubborn, Doma nodded vigorously and then eagerly started eating the fruits. Because she was really hungry. Then, a voice came from the other side. "Are you full? If not, I have more here." I'm full." Doma quickly wiped her mouth. It was a honeydew melon the size of a head and a sand fruit the size of a fist. Of course, she was full. Then, the person said, "Good, follow me." Doma stood up and walked forward. "Whatever happens, remember to hide first." "I understand." The third day in the underground cave. Doma had been in the underworld for 3 days. If she weren't there, Doma thought she would have gone crazy. The place was pitch black, and even though her eyes had slowly adjusted, it was too oppressive. Doma's nerves were constantly on edge, and there wasn't a moment of relaxation. But at least she was there. Following her, Doma would stop and rest every once in a while, as if she knew Doma had pushed herself to the limit. "Hey, big sister. I'm not your sister. But you're older than me." This made her silent. Doma knew she was also a girl because there was a strange sound in the cave once, and calmly, she told Doma to hide. Doma obediently followed her instructions and peeked out from behind a rock. In the dim cave, a piercing sound echoed, frightening Doma. It was the roar of a monster. That was definitely not a human sound. What followed was a battle. It was a fight between her and the monster. But what surprised Doma was that the battle ended very quickly, and the victor was the girl who had been helping her. And Doma, bathed in a strange purple beam, saw her face. It was a very beautiful face, more beautiful than anyone Doma had ever seen. But Doma only saw her for a moment, not even enough time to remember her features. Doma only knew she was beautiful. Doma liked beautiful things, and she was a child who knew how to be grateful. This helpful and beautiful sister Doma believed in her and wanted to get closer to her. But she was always so indifferent. Just like now. She was particularly indifferent. "You're right, but I'm not your big sister." "Why?" Doma, puzzled, said, "My dad said, as long as someone is older than me, I should politely address them. If it's a man, I call him big brother, if it's a woman, I call her big sister. You're a woman and older than me, so I should call you big sister, unless you're not human." Doma just wanted to play a small joke with her. After all, being with her was too cold. Of course, she was human. She could speak, and she looked so beautiful. A beautiful big sister. But what happened next made Doma's heart beat faster. She responded to Doma's words. However, she didn't argue, and, of course, she didn't agree either. She just spoke in a strange tone, saying lightly, "I don't know either." Doma didn't know what to say and could only silently watch that figure. After a while, Doma saw her move. "Let's go, Doma. We're in this together." Doma quickly caught up with her. Doma believed in her. Chapter 75. Please remember this name. The 5th day in the underground cavern. Today, Doma finally saw the monster she had killed. It was a strange creature with a tough exoskeleton, resembling a bug, large in size and exceptionally ugly and terrifying. It had a grotesque mouth with jaws that could open wide, and its head occupied half its size. The creature had small limbs, a shell emitting a purple glow, and its belly wasn't soft. Even in death, they looked truly terrifying. Due to this encounter, Doma, who had known the big sister for 5 days, saw her angry for the first time. It was the first time she was angry at Doma, but it made Doma very happy. "She cares about me. I told you to hide, so why did you come out?" She stood in the darkness, questioning Doma. "I just wanted to help." Doma said resolutely to her. "I'm the daughter of a hunter. I've crafted weapons these days, look." Doma raised a repaired short bow to show her. Then, she picked up her bone-made short dagger and, from a distance, shot towards the monster's corpse. Though it was dark, relying on the vague silhouette and the archery taught by her father, Doma accurately hit it. But the result surprised Doma. The sharp bone dagger didn't penetrate the monster's body, it merely scraped against its shell, producing a small spark. "Sorry, Doma immediately apologized to her. Her father had said that when facing powerful prey, one should listen to an experienced hunter because that could save your life. Now, Big Sister was that powerful hunter, a hunter dedicated to slaughtering these monsters in Doma's eyes. But the result was unexpected, yet she didn't get angry, instead, she laughed. Her tone was filled with laughter as she seemed to appreciate Doma, praising, "Well done. When I was your age, I never thought of dealing with them in this way. You're very talented. But, to kill them, Doma, relying on this isn't enough. You can choose to trap them and then let them starve." Doma was stunned. Did she just laugh? Did she praise me? Excitedly, Doma said, "Thank you. I'll do it from now on. I believe in you, Doma. You're a brave girl, a natural-born warrior." Once again, she acknowledged Doma. Powerful as she was, not as cold as Doma perceived. However, it seemed she said something significant. Recalling her beautiful big sister's earlier words, Doma immediately reacted, exclaiming, "Wait, big sister. I understood from what you said earlier. Did you start hunting them when you were very young?" "Doma, I told you not to call me big sister." She paused and continued, "And, it's not what you think. Back then, they were hunting me, and now, it's the other way around. Previously, they were hunters, and I was the prey. But now, I am the hunter, not the prey." Doma nodded. Picking up what she had thrown, Doma sat on the ground and started eating. Doma didn't know where she found the food. But everything tasted good. When hungry, anything you eat is happiness. While eating and resting, Doma asked her, "I still don't know your name." Doma wanted to understand her better. She is a good person. But she refused once again. "Doma, you're smart, you should know we are different." Doma fell silent, but quickly said, "But I don't feel like we are different in any way." She also fell silent but soon spoke in a casual manner, "That's because you're still young. When you grow a bit older, you'll realize we are completely different." Doma stopped talking. The sixth day in the underground caverns, or rather, not in the underground caverns anymore. After walking with her for many days, they finally exited the underground world. Dimly, Doma saw a beam of light. It was so bright that Doma closed her eyes instantly. But soon, something appeared on her face. It was a bit prickly and somewhat hard. But Doma could feel it was hands. "Don't open your eyes, Doma." For the first time, she was so close to Doma. Standing behind her, she covered Doma's eyes with her hands, gently guiding her outside. As Doma felt the warmth, she lost herself for a moment. She was too familiar with this warmth, it was the daytime sun. In Shurima, daytime was always this hot. "Where do you live?" she asked Doma. "Domo village, a village that survives by hunting." "Sorry, Doma, I haven't heard of it." "Then, big sister, you must not be a local. Domo village is quite famous around here. We are known for our powerful hunting skills on the Shurima continent." She didn't say anything but smiled lightly. "Hunting, hey?" But the smile quickly faded. From the entrance behind them came a sound only she could hear. It was a call, they were summoning her. The purple shoulder pods at her shoulder moved slightly, as if recalling their call. The skin on her shoulders wriggled again. Waves of stinging pain told her she was hungry. "Doma, cover your ears," she whispered. "Okay." Doma obediently covered her ears, but even so, she heard the booming explosions. This sound was familiar to her, it was her beautiful big sister making it. After the reverberations quieted, she said, "Doma, it seems I don't need to take you back. It looks like someone is looking for you." "Oh? Really?" Doma exclaimed in surprise. The hands on her face slowly loosened, and she walked backward. Doma noticed that the sun wasn't as dazzling now. Then, squinting, she looked ahead. It was her father. "Dad." "Doma. My daughter." A strong man wearing a short jacket made of sand tiger fur, carrying a longbow and a spear, looked at Doma with joy from a distance. But soon, his eyes swept from surprise to fear. Joy turned into terror, and he reached out to Doma, shouting, "Doma, come quickly. Get away from it." Doma looked at her father in confusion. Seeing her father and a group of adults reaching for weapons, aiming behind her, Doma realized something. She opened her arms wide and shouted, "Wait, Dad, what are you doing? Doma, quickly get away from that monster!" A hunter shouted loudly. "Monster? What monster?" Doma, angry and puzzled, turned around, but the next moment, she froze. A few meters behind her was a woman covered in a full suit of armor. She had soft black hair and a breathtakingly beautiful face. But she wasn't human. Doma looked at her, noticing the strange pods billowing on her shoulders, and the purple shell covering her body. The peculiar patterns on her body shimmered with a chilling purple light under the scorching sun. This chilled Doma's heart for a moment. Is her big sister really not human? Doma was very familiar with the color of that shell. She had seen many monster corpses underground, all killed by her sister. The shells on their bodies, the color, and the patterns were identical to hers. "Doma, go over here," she said calmly. But you... Doma stood there, unable to find words. Go to your father. It looks like they've been looking for you for a long time." She looked at Doma, smiling gently. "Don't let your family worry." Doma hesitated, but soon, she calmed down. Her big sister isn't a monster. She's a good person. Without her, Doma would be dead by now. So she's not a monster. She's just like me. Doma's gaze gradually became determined, but behind her, her father and the elders became increasingly anxious. "Doma, come over quickly. Get away from that monster. Damn it, Doton, that purple woman is an underground monster. She killed many people, destroyed many villages. Get Doma away from her. Go to hell, you monster." When an arrow appeared above Doma's head, Doma became furious. How could they? She's not a monster. Doma turned her head away from her sister, blocking her path with her arms wide open. Doma roared angrily, "Father, Uncle Gel, Uncle Rei, stop. All of you, stop. She's not a monster. She's not a monster. She saved Doma." But there, they didn't believe a child's words. It was normal, anyone seeing such a person with purple skin, recalling those terrifying rumors, wouldn't believe she could be a good person. She was a man-eating monster. "Doton, Doma has been bewitched by her. Quick, we need to form a defensive formation." They scattered, as if preparing to fight her. This made Doma even more desperate. Standing behind Doma, she smiled again, smiling very happily. "Doma, thank you. I like her," she thought. "This is a great girl." Just like her in the past, on Doma, she saw her younger self back when she was called Kaisa. "Doma, my time is running out." Hearing her words, Doma became nervous. With her back turned to her, Doma quickly said, Where are you going?" "Big sister, don't worry, I'll convince them. You're not a bad person, and definitely not a monster." "You can't, Doma. People only believe what they want to believe." "Yes, people only believe what they see. Even if it's not the truth. I've been to my hometown, it's not very far from here, actually." She smiled and said, "They used to like me a lot, but now, they call me a monster." "You're like me." Doma argued, "You saved me." "Yes, just like you." She stepped forward, patting Doma's head gently in front of their horrified expressions. That beautiful face revealed a light smile, a breathtaking one. "They don't really understand me. Because to them, I'm just something they don't want to face, a living, walking, fighting symbol, symbolizing their greatest fear. I guess that's why they changed my name." "Doma, haven't you always wanted to know my name?" Rubbing Doma's head, she said, "I'm called Kaisa. Please remember this name." Behind her, Kaisa heard whispers from the underground again. She frowned. The appearance of these people made them restless again. Soon, this area would be in danger. The shoulder pods stirred again, and Kaisa didn't hesitate. She knew it was time to part ways. Kaisa lowered her body, and two dazzling purple lights shot out from the pods on her shoulders, exploding near the group of people. The explosion's range could cover dozens of meters, but it didn't harm them at all, yet it scared them. And when the dust settled, Kaisa had disappeared. In panic, Doton rushed over, using both hands and feet. He embraced his daughter lying unconscious on the sandy ground, feeling her heartbeat. "She's alive, she's still alive, my daughter is alive!" Doton exclaimed joyfully. Rei, who came over, cursed, damn it, that monster came here. We need to go back and tell everyone, we have to move away. Right, protect Doma. Let's go back now. We need to leave this place, that monster is too dangerous. After they disappeared with Doma. Behind a large sandstone, Kaisa emerged. She was playing with a small bone-made dagger in her hand. She took it from Doma without her consent. Thank you, Doma. Kaisa looked at the direction they disappeared, a smile on her face. Very happy that a little girl acknowledged her existence. That's all that matters. Being treated as a monster doesn't matter. As long as I can help them. I came back for those who couldn't come back. Turning around, Kaisa's silhouette was determined. She would continue to fight. Until she drives those monsters out from the depths of Shurima. She is Kaisa. She is, Kaisa. // She got two names, one is her given name when she was born Kaisa and her adopted void name Kaisa. I know, big difference right? //
Thanks for listening.